Hey guys! 5,000 years before Rome ruled an empire, before the pyramids of Egypt were completed, and long before Athens became famous, a remarkable city rose from the plains of Mesopotamia. Its people invented writing, built colossal temples, created the world's first bureaucracy, and transformed humanity forever. Welcome to Uruk, the world's first great city. Before that, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comment where you tuning from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world. Today, we'll journey back to the place where cities first rose, where legends like Gilgamesh walked, and where humanity took its first steps into an urban world. Welcome to Uruk, the city that changed everything. A quiet world before cities. Before we step through the gates of Uruk, the world's first great city, let us travel even further back in time. Long before towering temples reached toward the sky, before merchants filled busy marketplaces, and before scribes pressed symbols into soft clay, the world was a much quieter place. Take a slow breath and imagine the earth nearly 7,000 years ago. There are no cities stretching across the horizon. No roads connecting distant kingdoms. No kings ruling over vast populations. No monuments carved from stone. Instead, the landscape is wide, peaceful, and open. Across the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia, the land gently rises and falls beneath a vast blue sky. In the distance, the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers wind patiently through the plains, just as they have for countless generations. Their currents move without hurry, carrying life wherever they flow. The air is warm. Reeds sway softly along the riverbanks. Birds circle overhead before settling among the wetlands, while fish glide quietly beneath the clear water. Every morning begins with the songs of nature rather than the sounds of crowds. Human beings already live here, but their world is very different from anything we would recognize today. Most families live in small villages, each home built from mud bricks shaped by hand and dried beneath the sun. These villages are scattered across the landscape, separated by fields, marshes, and open countryside. A settlement may contain only a few dozen families, all of whom know one another by name. Life follows the rhythm of the seasons. When the first light of dawn appears, people leave their homes to tend their crops. They grow barley, wheat, lentils, and flax in the rich soil left behind by the river's floods. Others care for sheep and goats, guiding them across nearby grasslands while children help gather firewood or fetch water from the river. There is little hurry. Without clocks, calendars hanging on walls, or crowded schedules, each day is measured by the rising and setting of the sun. Time itself seems slower, shaped by nature rather than by human invention. The villagers understand their land deeply. They know when the birds return with the changing seasons. They can sense approaching rain by watching the clouds gather over the distant horizon. They recognize every bend of the river, every patch of fertile soil, and every quiet place where fish can be caught. Their knowledge has been passed from parents to children for countless generations. As evening approaches, the heat begins to fade. Families gather outside their homes, sharing simple meals of bread, porridge, dates, vegetables, and occasionally fish or meat. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires while neighbors exchange stories beneath a sky slowly filling with stars. There are no written books. No letters. No recorded history. Every memory lives only in the minds of those who remember it. Stories are spoken aloud beside the fire. Children listen carefully as their grandparents describe ancient floods, successful harvests, or tales handed down from ancestors whose names have long since faded into memory. If someone forgets a story, part of that history disappears forever. The villages themselves are peaceful but not always easy places to live. Floods can destroy crops without warning. Dry seasons sometimes bring hunger. Disease spreads more easily than people understand, and injuries that seem small today can become life-threatening. Every harvest matters, and every family depends upon one another for survival. Yet these early communities possess something extraordinary. They have learned to live together. Instead of wandering endlessly in search of food, they have begun to settle. They plant seeds, build homes, raise children, and slowly transform the landscape around them. Each generation adds a little more than the one before. A larger house here. A new irrigation ditch there. A stronger storage building for grain. These changes are small, almost impossible to notice from one year to the next. But over many centuries, they begin to reshape the future of humanity. The villages grow a little larger. More families arrive. More fields are cultivated. Trade begins between neighboring settlements. One village may exchange grain for pottery, another may offer woven cloth or carefully crafted stone tools. Without realizing it, these quiet farming communities are laying the foundations of something entirely new. The idea of living together in ever-growing numbers slowly becomes possible. No one living in these villages could imagine the enormous city that would one day rise upon these plains. They could not foresee towering temples, bustling markets, or thousands of people living side by side within protective walls. They simply wake with the sunrise, care for their families, and hope for another successful harvest. And yet, hidden within these ordinary days is the beginning of one of humanity's greatest transformations. The peaceful villages of Mesopotamia are preparing the way for something the world has never seen before. A place where thousands of strangers will live together. A place where writing will be born. A place where civilization itself will begin. That place is called Uruk. The first farmers and the seeds of civilization. As the evening sky darkens over the plains of ancient Mesopotamia, the villages slowly fall silent. Cooking fires burn low, families retreat into their simple mud brick homes, and above them stretches a sky filled with countless stars. With no lamps to brighten the night beyond the soft glow of firelight, the heavens appear astonishingly clear. The Milky Way arches overhead like a river of light, reminding every person below that they are part of a world far greater than themselves. Morning will come again, just as it always has. Long before the first city rose from these fertile lands, life moved with a quiet and dependable rhythm. Every season brought familiar tasks, and every generation inherited the same responsibilities from those who came before. Yet beneath this peaceful routine, slow changes were taking place, changes so gradual that no single person could have noticed them, but powerful enough to alter the course of human history forever. Thousands of years earlier, many people had lived as hunters and gatherers, traveling from place to place in search of food. They followed migrating animals, gathered wild fruits and grains, and built temporary shelters wherever nature provided what they needed. Their lives demanded constant movement, shaped by the changing seasons and the availability of food. But somewhere along the long path of human history, something remarkable happened. People began to observe the natural world more carefully. They noticed that seeds scattered onto the earth often grew into new plants. They learned which grains produced the best harvests and which soils remained fertile after the rivers flooded. Over many generations, these observations became knowledge, and that knowledge slowly transformed into farming. It was not a sudden discovery made in a single moment. Instead, it was the patient work of countless families, each learning a little more than the last. Perhaps someone noticed that barley grew especially well in a certain field. Another family discovered that storing seeds from the strongest plants produced healthier crops the following year. Little by little, farming became more reliable, allowing people to harvest food rather than simply search for it. This simple change brought an extraordinary gift. For the first time, many families could remain in one place throughout the year. Instead of wandering across the landscape, they built homes designed to last. Mud from the riverbanks was shaped into bricks and left beneath the warm Mesopotamian sun until it hardened. Walls rose slowly, one brick at a time, creating homes that sheltered families from heat, wind, and occasional storms. Though modest by modern standards, these houses represented something entirely new. They were permanent. Children were born within their walls. Parents grew old there. Memories accumulated in the same place year after year, giving each village a sense of continuity that had been impossible for wandering communities. Outside these homes, fields stretched toward the horizon. The farmers of Mesopotamia cultivated barley more than any other crop. It thrived in the warm climate and provided dependable harvests. Wheat also grew in many places, along with lentils, peas, onions, garlic, dates, and flax, which could be woven into cloth. Every member of the household had responsibilities. Before sunrise, adults walked into the fields carrying simple wooden tools. Children often accompanied them, learning through observation rather than formal lessons. They watched their parents prepare the soil, scatter seeds, pull unwanted weeds, and harvest ripened grain beneath the bright summer sun. There was no separation between work and daily life. Learning happened naturally, from one generation to the next. Even the youngest children understood the importance of the harvest, for everyone depended upon it. Nearby grazed sheep and goats, animals that had gradually become trusted companions rather than wild creatures to be hunted. They supplied milk, wool, hides, and meat when needed. Their presence added another layer of security to village life. As farming improved, something unexpected began to happen. Not every harvest was consumed immediately. Some grain remained after the needs of the village had been met. This surplus may seem ordinary today, but in the ancient world it was revolutionary. Stored carefully inside clay jars or communal granaries, extra grain became protection against difficult years. If floods arrived too early or rains failed to come, families could survive because food had been saved during more fortunate seasons. A dependable food supply also created something equally important: time. When every person no longer needed to search constantly for food, some individuals could devote themselves to other skills. One person became especially skilled at shaping clay into smooth pottery. Another learned to weave finer cloth. Someone else crafted stronger tools from stone or copper. Gradually, the first specialists appeared within these quiet farming communities. The villages remained peaceful, but they were becoming more complex with every passing generation. As population slowly increased, cooperation became even more important. Digging irrigation channels required many hands working together. Building larger storage buildings demanded careful planning. Harvesting fields before seasonal storms arrived depended upon neighbors helping one another. The success of one family increasingly relied upon the success of the entire community. This spirit of cooperation helped strengthen the villages. It also encouraged trade. A family with excellent pottery might exchange jars for grain. Shepherds traded wool for vegetables. Skilled toolmakers provided stronger farming equipment in return for food or cloth. No coins yet existed. Trade depended upon trust, conversation, and mutual need. Visitors occasionally arrived from neighboring settlements carrying unfamiliar goods. Bright stones from distant hills, shells gathered near the sea, or rare pieces of copper hinted that the world beyond the village was much larger than anyone could see from their fields. Every exchange brought new ideas as well as new materials. The villages were no longer isolated. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, invisible connections spread across Mesopotamia. The rivers themselves encouraged these relationships. Small boats drifted along quiet waterways carrying baskets of grain, pottery, reeds, and woven textiles between settlements. The current moved gently, linking communities that might otherwise have remained strangers. With each passing century, these connections became stronger. Some villages prospered more than others. Their fertile land produced larger harvests. Their craftsmen gained greater reputations. Their locations along rivers attracted travelers and merchants. People naturally gravitated toward places where opportunities were greatest. Without realizing it, they were taking the first steps toward urban life. No grand plan guided this transformation. There was no ruler announcing the creation of a city. Instead, thousands of ordinary decisions shaped the future. A family chose to settle near reliable water. Another remained because the harvest had been plentiful. A craftsman stayed because more customers arrived every season. A merchant returned because trade was good. Generation after generation, these simple choices accumulated until certain settlements grew larger than anyone had imagined possible. Among them was one settlement that occupied an especially fortunate place on the Mesopotamian plain. Fed by fertile soil, connected by waterways, and enriched through trade, it quietly expanded while centuries passed. Its houses multiplied. Its population increased. Its influence spread far beyond the surrounding countryside. No one living there could yet know that future generations would remember its name for thousands of years. One day, archaeologists would uncover its walls. Historians would study its temples. Students around the world would learn that this remarkable settlement marked the beginning of urban civilization. Its name was Uruk. But before its temples reached toward the heavens and before its streets echoed with the footsteps of thousands, nature itself had prepared the perfect stage. The gentle rhythm of the Tigris and Euphrates. As the first light of dawn slowly spreads across the horizon, the villages of southern Mesopotamia begin to awaken once more. The cool air of early morning lingers for only a short while before the warmth of the sun gradually settles over the great plain. Birds rise from the tall reeds that line the riverbanks, their calls drifting softly across the water. A gentle breeze ripples the surface of the rivers, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and fresh vegetation. If you were standing here more than 5,000 years ago, you would notice something remarkable. The land itself seems almost endless. There are no mountains rising dramatically in the distance, no dense forests stretching across the horizon. Instead, wide open plains extend as far as the eye can see, interrupted only by winding rivers, quiet marshes, and patches of fertile farmland that shimmer beneath the morning light. This is Mesopotamia, a name given much later by the ancient Greeks, meaning the land between the rivers. Those two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, are the reason civilization could flourish here. Without them, this landscape would have been harsh and unforgiving. Rainfall in southern Mesopotamia was never plentiful enough to support large communities on its own. Much of the region experienced long, dry seasons beneath an intense sun, where fields could quickly wither without a dependable source of water. Yet year after year, the rivers quietly transformed the land. Far to the north, in the mountains of what is now eastern Turkey, winter snow gathered upon the high peaks. As spring arrived and the snow slowly melted, countless streams flowed downhill, feeding the mighty Tigris and Euphrates. These rivers carried not only fresh water but also rich silt, tiny particles of fertile soil gathered along their long journey. Eventually, that water reached the broad plains of southern Mesopotamia. The rivers overflowed their banks, spreading across the surrounding land before slowly retreating once more. When the floodwaters disappeared, they left behind a fresh layer of dark, nutrient-rich earth. To the people living here, this was one of nature's greatest gifts. Fields that might otherwise have remained dry and barren became fertile enough to produce generous harvests. Barley, wheat, dates, lentils, onions, and flax all thrived in the soil renewed by the rivers. Every growing season depended upon this quiet partnership between people and nature. The villagers understood that the rivers deserved both gratitude and respect. They knew that water could bring abundance, but they also knew it could bring destruction. Some years the floods arrived gently, nourishing the fields exactly as they hoped. Other years the waters rose unexpectedly, sweeping away crops, damaging homes, and forcing entire communities to begin again. Life beside the rivers required patience. There was no way to command the water. Instead, people learned to observe it carefully. They watched how the current changed through the seasons. They remembered where floodwaters reached in previous years. They noticed which fields remained moist longest after the rivers receded. Generation after generation, this knowledge grew more detailed. Slowly, people discovered that they did not always have to wait for the rivers to decide where the water would flow. With simple tools made of wood, stone, and later copper, they began digging narrow channels from the rivers into nearby fields. These early irrigation canals were modest by modern standards, yet they represented one of humanity's greatest achievements. For the first time, people were learning to guide nature rather than simply react to it. Water that once flowed only where the rivers carried it could now be directed toward thirsty crops. Small embankments helped control the flow. Simple gates allowed farmers to release water when it was needed and block it when fields had received enough. The work was slow. Entire villages cooperated to dig these channels beneath the hot Mesopotamian sun. Men, women, and older children all contributed in different ways. Some carried baskets filled with earth, while others shaped the banks or repaired sections damaged by previous floods. No single family could have completed such projects alone. The canals belonged to everyone because everyone depended upon them. This shared responsibility strengthened the bonds between neighboring families. Each successful harvest reminded them that cooperation could accomplish far more than individual effort. As the years passed, the network of canals slowly expanded. Water reached fields that had once been too dry for farming. Larger harvests followed. More grain could be stored. More families settled nearby. Without realizing it, the people of Mesopotamia were laying another important foundation for the world's first city. The rivers offered far more than fertile soil and fresh water. They also became peaceful highways connecting distant communities. Imagine standing upon the bank of the Euphrates on a quiet afternoon. A small wooden boat appears around a gentle bend in the river. Its crew paddles steadily downstream while baskets of grain, pottery, woven cloth, and fresh dates are carefully stacked inside. Another boat carries reeds gathered from nearby marshes. A third transports finely crafted tools. The current itself helps move these vessels from one settlement to another. Journeys that would have required many days across open land become easier upon the water. Merchants begin meeting people they have never seen before. Ideas travel alongside goods. New farming techniques spread from village to village. Different styles of pottery appear in distant communities. Stories, songs, and traditions quietly flow along the rivers just as surely as the boats themselves. Over time, these peaceful exchanges weave countless villages into a much larger network. Although none of these people could have imagined the modern world, they were already participating in something surprisingly familiar. They were becoming connected. The rivers also shaped the natural beauty of the land. Tall reeds swayed gently beside the water, providing material for baskets, roofs, mats, boats, and even writing tools in later centuries. Palm trees lined many riverbanks, their broad leaves rustling softly whenever warm breezes passed through them. Date palms offered sweet fruit that could be eaten fresh or dried for later use. Fish filled the waterways. Wild ducks nested among the marshes. Water buffalo wandered through shallow pools, while gazelles occasionally grazed along the edges of the fertile plain. For many villagers, the rivers were more than sources of survival. They were places of quiet reflection. Children played beside the shallow banks while parents washed clothes or gathered water in clay jars. Fishermen patiently cast their nets into calm waters as the afternoon sun reflected upon the gentle current. In the evenings, families often sat outside their homes listening to frogs calling from nearby marshes while the rivers continued their endless journey toward the sea. The sound of flowing water became the background music of everyday life. It had always been there. It would remain long after individual generations had come and gone. Perhaps no one fully realized it at the time, but these rivers were quietly guiding history itself. Every harvest they nourished. Every canal they filled. Every boat they carried. Every village they connected. Step by step, century after century, the Tigris and Euphrates were preparing the perfect conditions for something entirely new. Soon, one settlement would begin growing faster than all the others. Its fields would expand. Its temples would rise. Its streets would fill with thousands of people from across the surrounding countryside. The peaceful rhythm of the rivers had made it possible. How water brought life to the plains. The morning sun has now climbed higher into the sky, and a gentle warmth spreads across the broad plains of southern Mesopotamia. The rivers continue their quiet journey, flowing just as they have for countless generations. Their waters move patiently through the land, reflecting the blue of the sky and the green reeds that grow along their banks. To someone visiting this place more than 5,000 years ago, the landscape might appear simple at first glance. There are no towering mountains to admire, nor dense forests stretching endlessly into the distance. Instead, there is a wide horizon, where earth and sky seem to meet without interruption. Yet beneath this peaceful simplicity lies one of the most extraordinary environments in human history. Everything here depends upon water. Every field of barley waving gently in the breeze. Every date palm offering shade beneath the afternoon sun. Every flock of sheep grazing quietly near the river banks. Every family gathered around an evening meal. All of it begins with the rivers. For the people of ancient Mesopotamia, water was never something to be taken for granted. They understood, through generations of careful observation, that the rivers gave life to the land. Without them, these plains would have been dry, dusty, and unable to support large communities. Because of this, the changing seasons became deeply woven into everyday life. Each year, families watched the rivers closely. They noticed the level of the water, the speed of the current, and the arrival of the annual floods. Older villagers shared their knowledge with younger generations, pointing to marks left on the riverbanks from previous years and explaining what they meant. No written calendars existed yet. Nature itself became the calendar. The arrival of birds, the blooming of certain plants, and the slow rise of the rivers all signaled that another farming season was beginning. When the floodwaters finally receded, the real work could begin. Farmers stepped into the moist earth carrying simple wooden hoes and digging sticks. Working together, they prepared the soil while it was still soft from the recent floods. Seeds were scattered by hand across carefully prepared fields, each one carrying the quiet hope of a successful harvest. The work demanded patience. Nothing happened quickly. The seeds rested beneath the soil while warm sunlight and river water slowly awakened new life. Days passed into weeks, and tiny green shoots gradually appeared across the fields. For the farmers, this was always a comforting sight. It meant that another season of growth had begun. As the crops matured, the irrigation canals became increasingly important. Although the rivers had provided the first floodwaters, the growing plants still needed regular moisture throughout the long, hot months. The canals carried precious water across the fields, allowing farmers to nourish their crops even when the rivers remained within their banks. Maintaining these canals became one of the community's greatest responsibilities. Each spring, villagers inspected them carefully. If a section had collapsed during the previous flood, everyone worked together to rebuild it. Mud was packed firmly into the canal walls. Fallen reeds were cleared away. Small embankments were strengthened before the next growing season. The work was not glamorous. It was repetitive, often exhausting beneath the bright Mesopotamian sun. Yet no one questioned its importance. Every repaired canal meant healthier crops. Every healthy crop meant full granaries. Every full granary meant another year of security for the entire village. In many ways, the canals became symbols of cooperation. One family alone could never have built such a network. Only an entire community working patiently together could guide the rivers across the plain. As generations passed, these irrigation systems became more sophisticated. Canals reached farther into the countryside. Additional branches carried water to newly cultivated fields. Small reservoirs helped store water during especially dry periods. Although simple compared with modern engineering, these achievements demonstrated remarkable understanding of the natural world. The people were learning not to conquer nature, but to work alongside it. Their success transformed the landscape itself. Places that had once supported only scattered vegetation gradually became productive farmland. Golden barley covered the plains during harvest season. Date palm groves multiplied along the waterways. Vegetable gardens flourished near the villages. Where only a few families had once lived, many more could now find food and shelter. Population increased slowly but steadily. Children grew into adults, raised families of their own, and built new homes beside those of their parents. Travelers from neighboring settlements occasionally decided to remain, attracted by fertile land and dependable harvests. Without anyone planning it, villages slowly expanded. With larger populations came new opportunities. Some people became especially skilled at building stronger houses. Others crafted beautiful pottery decorated with elegant patterns. Skilled weavers produced fine cloth from flax and wool. Carpenters shaped wooden tools and furniture with increasing precision. Each craft improved a little from one generation to the next. The villages were no longer simply places where people survived. They were becoming places where knowledge accumulated. Every elder carried decades of experience. Every craftsman refined techniques learned from teachers before them. Every successful harvest added confidence that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. Trade also flourished because of the rivers. Boats continued traveling quietly between settlements, carrying goods that could not easily be produced everywhere. One village might exchange surplus grain for carefully made pottery. Another offered woven textiles in return for copper tools brought from distant lands. Bitumen, a naturally occurring substance used for waterproofing boats and buildings, became an especially valuable resource. Lapis lazuli, a brilliant blue stone from faraway mountains, occasionally found its way into Mesopotamia through long chains of trade. These objects reminded people that their world stretched far beyond the horizon. Although they might never travel such great distances themselves, they were connected to countless other communities through peaceful exchange. As wealth slowly increased, villages began constructing larger communal buildings. Some stored grain for difficult years. Others served as gathering places where important decisions could be discussed. Religious life also became more organized. Small shrines dedicated to the gods gradually grew in importance. People believed the rivers, harvests, and changing seasons reflected divine blessings. Offerings of grain, fruit, bread, and livestock were presented with gratitude, asking that another year of prosperity might follow. Faith became another force that united the community. People worked together. They celebrated together. They prayed together. Their shared lives created bonds that extended far beyond individual families. Over many centuries, these quiet patterns repeated again and again. Harvest followed harvest. Children became parents. Parents became grandparents. The rivers continued flowing, never hurried, never still. Each passing generation added another layer to the story of Mesopotamia. The changes were almost invisible within a single lifetime. But viewed across hundreds of years, they were extraordinary. Villages became towns. Trade routes became busier. Canals stretched farther across the plains. Temples grew larger. Communities attracted more people than ever before. Among all these growing settlements, one possessed an especially fortunate location. It stood where fertile fields, busy waterways, and expanding trade networks came together. Its people benefited from generations of careful farming, peaceful cooperation, and abundant harvests. Slowly, almost quietly, this settlement began growing faster than any other. More families arrived. More houses were built. More merchants filled its marketplaces. Its temples became larger and more impressive with every passing generation. The transformation was so gradual that those living there scarcely noticed it. Yet history would remember. For this settlement was preparing to become something entirely new. Not merely a village. Not simply a town. But the first true city the world had ever known. A small settlement begins to grow. As another dawn breaks over the fertile plains of southern Mesopotamia, a thin veil of mist drifts quietly above the canals. The first rays of sunlight touch the tops of the date palms, painting them in soft shades of gold. Birds glide low over the calm water before disappearing into the tall reeds, while somewhere in the distance, the gentle sound of a wooden paddle echoes across the river. The day is beginning much as it has for countless generations. Farmers leave their homes before the heat of the afternoon arrives. Shepherds guide their flocks toward fresh grazing land. Potters prepare fresh clay gathered from the riverbanks, while fishermen untangle their nets before setting out upon the quiet waters. At first glance, it seems like any other peaceful settlement in Mesopotamia. Yet this place is different. The people who live here cannot know it, but they are standing at the beginning of one of humanity's greatest achievements. This settlement is called Uruk. Its story does not begin with towering temples or crowded streets. It begins with ordinary people. Many centuries earlier, Uruk had been little more than a modest farming community, much like dozens of others scattered across the southern plains. A few families built their homes upon slightly higher ground, close enough to the rivers to benefit from fresh water, yet safely above the worst of the seasonal floods. It was a wise choice. The nearby land was exceptionally fertile, nourished year after year by the rivers and enriched by carefully maintained irrigation canals. Harvests were often generous, providing enough food not only for survival but for steady growth. Generation after generation, the settlement slowly expanded. Children grew into adults and built homes beside those of their parents. New families arrived from neighboring villages, attracted by the fertile fields and dependable harvests. Some came seeking better farmland. Others arrived because trade offered new opportunities. A few may simply have believed that this quiet settlement promised a more secure future for their children. No great announcement marked their arrival. There were no city gates welcoming newcomers. Each family simply became another thread woven into the growing fabric of the community. As the years passed, houses spread farther across the landscape. The earliest homes were simple structures built from sun-dried mud bricks. Their thick walls helped keep the interiors cool during the hottest months of the year. Flat roofs provided places to work, rest, or sleep beneath the stars on warm summer nights. Inside, the rooms were modest but carefully arranged. Clay jars stored grain from the latest harvest. Simple woven mats covered portions of the floor. Wooden stools and baskets held the family's belongings. A small hearth provided warmth for cooking bread, porridge, vegetables, and fish caught in nearby canals. Life remained uncomplicated. The rising sun signaled the beginning of each day's work, while the fading light invited families to gather together once more. Even as Uruk grew larger, many familiar traditions remained unchanged. Children still learned by watching their parents. Mothers taught daughters to grind grain, weave cloth, and prepare meals. Fathers showed sons how to care for irrigation channels, tend livestock, and cultivate the fields. Grandparents shared stories that had been passed from one generation to the next, preserving memories in a world where writing had not yet fully developed. Every lesson was spoken. Every tradition was remembered. Nothing was written down. The people of Uruk were becoming more numerous, but they remained deeply connected to the rhythms of nature. The arrival of spring brought new planting. Summer demanded careful attention to irrigation. Autumn rewarded months of patient work with golden fields ready for harvest. Winter offered a brief period of rest and repair before another cycle began. Nature continued to guide every aspect of life. Yet beneath this peaceful routine, quiet changes were unfolding. As more people settled in Uruk, not everyone needed to spend each day farming. Abundant harvests created opportunities for new kinds of work. Some individuals became highly skilled potters, producing vessels of remarkable quality. Their clay jars stored grain, carried water, and transported goods to neighboring settlements. Others devoted themselves to weaving fine textiles from wool and flax. Their cloth was softer, stronger, and more beautifully crafted than before. Stone workers carefully shaped grinding tools and building materials. Metal workers, using precious copper obtained through trade, created sharper blades, stronger tools, and elegant ornaments. Each craft improved through years of patient practice. Knowledge accumulated slowly, handed from experienced masters to eager apprentices. The settlement became known not only for its fertile land but also for the quality of its craftsmanship. Merchants soon noticed. Boats traveling along the Euphrates began stopping more frequently at Uruk's riverbanks. They arrived carrying goods from distant communities, timber from northern forests, copper from eastern mountains, shells gathered along distant shores, and precious stones whose brilliant colors fascinated those who had never traveled beyond the Mesopotamian plain. In return, Uruk offered grain, woven cloth, pottery, dates, wool, and finely crafted goods. The marketplace slowly became one of the liveliest places in the settlement. There was no shouting or hurried pace. Instead, conversations unfolded patiently. Merchants greeted one another warmly. Farmers inspected tools before agreeing to a trade. Potters admired unfamiliar designs brought from distant lands. Children watched with quiet curiosity as strangers unloaded boats filled with remarkable objects they had never seen before. Every visitor brought more than merchandise. They also carried stories. Stories of distant rivers. Stories of unfamiliar villages. Stories of different customs and traditions. Through these peaceful exchanges, the people of Uruk gradually came to understand that they were part of a much larger world. As prosperity increased, another important transformation quietly began. The settlement required greater organization. Irrigation canals had to be maintained regularly. Harvests needed to be stored safely. Trade required careful coordination. Disagreements between neighbors occasionally needed fair solutions. These responsibilities encouraged respected elders and community leaders to work together more closely than ever before. Rather than acting only as farmers, they gradually became organizers of village life. Their decisions affected everyone. Although simple by modern standards, these early forms of cooperation represented the first gentle steps toward organized government. Religion also became increasingly central to the growing settlement. Small shrines that had once served only a handful of families expanded into larger sacred spaces. The people believed their prosperity depended upon maintaining harmony with the gods. They offered bread, grain, fruit, milk, and woven cloth in quiet ceremonies filled with gratitude rather than extravagance. The priests who cared for these sacred places became respected members of the community. They observed the seasons, organized religious festivals, and reminded everyone of the deep connection between humanity and the natural world. As the settlement expanded, the temple slowly became more than a place of worship. It became the heart of the community itself. Nearby, craftsmen worked. Merchants traded. Farmers gathered after long days in the fields. Travelers found familiar faces before continuing their journeys. Without anyone intending it, the settlement had developed a peaceful center around which daily life revolved. Century after century, these gentle transformations continued. No single year appeared dramatically different from the one before it. The changes were gradual, almost invisible. A few more houses, another canal, a slightly larger temple, a busier marketplace, another family choosing to make Uruk their home. Yet when viewed across hundreds of years, the transformation was astonishing. The quiet farming settlement that had once consisted of only a few families was becoming something the world had never witnessed before. Its population was growing into the thousands. Its influence extended far beyond the surrounding countryside. Travelers increasingly spoke its name with admiration. Uruk was no longer simply another settlement upon the Mesopotamian plain. It was quietly becoming the center of an emerging civilization. The greatest chapter of its story, however, was still waiting to unfold. When a village became the world's first city. The sun rises slowly over the plains of southern Mesopotamia, casting a warm golden light across the canals that surround the growing settlement of Uruk. The morning air is still cool, and a gentle mist lingers above the water before fading beneath the first rays of daylight. From every direction, people begin their day. Farmers walk toward the fields with wooden tools resting upon their shoulders. Potters knead fresh clay beside their workshops. Fishermen push their reed boats into the quiet canals, while merchants carefully prepare baskets of goods for another day of trade. At first, everything appears much the same as it has for generations. Yet beneath this peaceful routine, Uruk is quietly changing. It is no longer simply a farming village. With each passing generation, more people choose to make this place their home. Some arrive from nearby settlements after hearing of fertile land and abundant harvests. Others come because Uruk's craftsmen have earned a reputation for producing fine pottery, woven textiles, and beautifully crafted tools. Traders arrive by boat carrying timber, copper, precious stones, shells, and goods from distant lands. Many stay longer than they had planned. The settlement welcomes them all. New homes begin appearing beyond the older neighborhoods. The sound of builders shaping mud bricks becomes increasingly familiar. Families work together beneath the warm sun, stacking brick upon brick until sturdy walls begin to rise. Flat roofs are covered with reeds and packed earth, providing shelter from both the summer heat and the occasional winter rain. As the years pass, the houses stand closer together. Footpaths that once wound gently between scattered homes gradually become well-used streets. Children laugh as they run through narrow lanes carrying woven baskets or helping their parents with small daily tasks. Neighbors greet one another each morning as they sweep the dust from their doorways or fetch fresh water from nearby canals. Life remains peaceful. Yet it is becoming busier than ever before. The population continues to grow. Historians believe that by around 3500 to 3000 BCE, Uruk had become home to tens of thousands of people, an astonishing number for the ancient world. Some estimates suggest that as many as 40,000 or even 50,000 people may have lived within and around the city during its greatest period of growth. For people of that time, such numbers would have seemed almost unimaginable. Many neighboring villages contained only a few hundred inhabitants. Uruk was becoming something entirely different. It was becoming a city. Of course, the people living there would not have used those words. They simply noticed that every season brought new faces. More boats arrived at the riverbanks. More grain filled the storehouses. More workshops appeared beside the streets. More voices echoed through the marketplaces. The heart of Uruk beat a little stronger with every passing year. The marketplace became one of the city's busiest gathering places. As the morning sun climbed higher into the sky, merchants carefully arranged their goods upon woven mats or simple wooden tables. Fresh dates, barley, onions, fish, pottery, baskets, wool, woven cloth, copper tools, and carved ornaments filled the market with color and variety. Conversations drifted gently through the warm air. A farmer exchanged grain for a new clay jar. A shepherd traded wool for sharpened tools. A merchant proudly displayed bright blue lapis lazuli that had traveled hundreds of miles from distant mountains. Children watched with wide eyes, fascinated by objects they had never seen before. Trade was no longer an occasional event. It had become part of everyday life. The streets themselves reflected the growing complexity of the settlement. Some areas became known for pottery workshops, where rows of newly shaped vessels dried beneath the sun before being fired in carefully built kilns. Elsewhere, skilled weavers worked patiently with wool and flax, creating cloth for clothing, blankets, and trade. Metalworkers hammered copper into useful tools that made farming and construction easier than ever before. The air carried many familiar sounds. The steady rhythm of stone grinding grain. The soft splash of water flowing through canals. The distant voices of merchants greeting travelers. The gentle tapping of craftsmen shaping wood, clay, and copper. Although Uruk was becoming increasingly busy, it remained closely connected to nature. Canals continued flowing quietly through the settlement, bringing fresh water to homes, workshops, and nearby fields. Date palms offered welcome shade during the hottest hours of the afternoon. Birds nested among the reeds, just as they always had. The rivers that had given birth to the settlement remained its faithful companions. As Uruk expanded, its temples also grew in size and importance. Simple shrines that had once served a small farming community gradually became magnificent religious centers built upon raised platforms. These sacred places stood proudly above the surrounding buildings, visible from great distances across the flat Mesopotamian plain. People gathered there not only to worship but also to celebrate seasonal festivals, offer thanks for successful harvests, and seek guidance during uncertain times. Religion became one of the great threads holding the growing community together. The temple also became a place where food was stored, work was organized, and important decisions were made. As thousands of people began living together, careful organization became increasingly necessary. Someone needed to oversee irrigation canals. Someone needed to supervise large building projects. Someone needed to ensure that grain could be stored safely after each harvest. These responsibilities gradually encouraged the development of more organized leadership. Not through sudden revolution. Not through dramatic conquest. But through quiet cooperation. This peaceful evolution was one of Uruk's greatest achievements. The city did not simply grow larger. It became more organized. Its people learned how to live together in numbers that humanity had never experienced before. For perhaps the first time in history, thousands of individuals who were not closely related shared the same streets, temples, marketplaces, and public spaces. That required trust, patience, shared customs, and careful planning. As evening approached, the city slowly changed its rhythm. The intense heat of the afternoon gave way to cooler air carried gently across the plain. Merchants packed away their remaining goods. Farmers returned from the fields. Smoke drifted upward from cooking fires as families prepared simple meals of bread, barley porridge, vegetables, fish, dates, and occasionally meat. Children played outside while their grandparents shared stories beneath the fading light. Oil lamps flickered softly inside homes. The stars gradually appeared overhead, just as they had for countless generations before. Although Uruk had become the largest settlement the world had ever known, moments of quiet still remained. The gentle flow of water through the canals continued without pause. Frogs called from nearby marshes. A cool breeze rustled the leaves of the date palms. The city rested peacefully beneath the night sky. Yet beneath this calm surface, another extraordinary change was quietly waiting to emerge. As Uruk continued to grow, remembering everything became increasingly difficult. There were more harvests to count, more goods to trade, more workers to organize, more offerings presented to the temples. Memory alone was no longer enough. Soon, someone would press a simple reed into a soft clay tablet, creating marks that could preserve information long after spoken words had faded. Those small impressions would become the beginning of writing itself. And with them, humanity would enter an entirely new chapter of history. Clay, reeds, and the first written words. The morning arrives quietly over the city of Uruk. As the first golden light reaches the tops of the temples, the city slowly awakens once again. Smoke rises gently from household hearths, fishermen guide their small boats onto the canals, and merchants begin arranging baskets filled with grain, dates, woven cloth, and pottery for another peaceful day in the marketplace. From a distance, Uruk appears calm and orderly. Its canals carry fresh water through the neighborhoods. The fields beyond the city wall sway softly beneath the warm breeze. Date palms cast long shadows across the dusty paths, while birds circle gracefully above the marshes. Yet beneath this peaceful rhythm, the city has become more complex than ever before. Generations have passed since Uruk was only a small farming settlement. Now thousands of people call it home. Every harvest is larger. Every marketplace is busier. Every season brings new families, new craftsmen, and new merchants from distant lands. With this growth comes a quiet challenge. How can a city remember everything? In the early days, memory had been enough. A village elder could easily remember which family owned a field, how much grain had been stored after the harvest, or which shepherd had exchanged wool for barley. When only a few dozen families lived together, spoken words were usually sufficient. Promises were remembered. Trades were witnessed. Stories passed naturally from one generation to the next. But Uruk was no longer a village. Its temples received offerings every day. Storehouses filled with thousands of baskets of grain. Merchants arrived carrying goods from lands hundreds of miles away. Workers gathered to repair canals, construct buildings, and tend the expanding fields. The amount of information grew larger with every passing season. Even the wisest elder could not remember every detail forever. Imagine standing inside one of Uruk's great temple storehouses. The room is cool despite the warmth outside. Tall clay jars line the walls, each one filled with barley gathered from the recent harvest. Nearby are baskets of dates, bundles of wool, jars of oil, and stacks of pottery waiting to be distributed. People arrive throughout the day carrying offerings from the surrounding countryside. Some bring grain. Others deliver vegetables, fish, or woven cloth. Temple workers carefully receive every contribution. But an important question soon arises. Who brought these goods? How much grain has already been stored? How much should be given to the workers helping maintain the canals? How much should remain for future seasons? If no one keeps an accurate record, confusion will soon follow. At first, the people of Mesopotamia found wonderfully simple solutions. Long before true writing appeared, they used small clay tokens. These tiny objects were carefully shaped into different forms. A round token might represent a measure of grain. Another shape could stand for a sheep. Others represented jars of oil or bundles of cloth. The tokens were stored inside hollow clay balls, sometimes called bulli. Before sealing the clay, officials placed the appropriate number of tokens inside. The clay ball itself became a record of an agreement or a transaction. As long as it remained sealed, everyone trusted that the contents accurately represented what had been exchanged. It was an ingenious idea. Yet as Uruk continued growing, even this clever system became difficult to manage. Opening each clay ball simply to count the tokens inside was inconvenient. The city needed something easier. Something quicker. Something that could preserve information without opening a sealed container. And so, one quiet innovation led naturally to another. Instead of placing tokens inside the clay, someone had the simple but brilliant idea of pressing the shapes directly onto its surface. A mark in the clay could represent the same information as the token itself. There was no need to open anything. The record could be read immediately. No one living in Uruk could have known it at the time, but this small idea would change human history forever. Nearby, along the edges of the marshes, tall reeds grew in abundance. For countless generations they had been used to build houses, weave baskets, and construct boats. Now these ordinary plants found an entirely new purpose. Their stems were cut, trimmed, and shaped into simple writing tools. One end was pressed into a wedge-like tip. When gently pushed into soft clay, it left a neat triangular impression. Different combinations of these tiny impressions created different symbols. The earliest marks were beautifully simple. They did not represent spoken language in the way modern alphabets do. Instead, they represented objects. A measure of barley. A sheep. A jar of oil. A basket. A worker. Each mark carried practical meaning. Most early records had little to do with literature or storytelling. They were humble documents created for everyday life. Lists of grain. Records of livestock. Inventories of goods. Temple accounts. Payments to workers. The first written words were born not from poetry but from the peaceful routines of ordinary people. Imagine sitting beside one of the city's earliest record keepers. A fresh clay tablet rests comfortably upon his lap. It is no larger than a modern notebook, its surface smooth and still damp from careful preparation. Nearby lies a bundle of freshly cut reed styluses. As farmers arrive carrying baskets of barley, he quietly presses small wedge-shaped marks into the clay. Each movement is calm and deliberate. There is no hurry. The soft sound of the stylus entering the clay is almost gentle. Press. Lift. Turn. Press again. One symbol records grain. Another records quantity. A third identifies the temple storehouse receiving the harvest. When the tablet is complete, it is placed beneath the warm Mesopotamian sun to dry. Some tablets remain unfired, while others are baked to become harder and more durable. Many of those simple clay tablets survive even today. For more than 5,000 years they rested quietly beneath the earth, waiting for archaeologists to uncover them once again. They speak to us without voices. They tell us how much grain was harvested. How many sheep belonged to a temple? Which workers received food for repairing canals? These ordinary records have become extraordinary windows into the earliest chapters of civilization. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this invention is its quiet simplicity. No king ordered the creation of writing to achieve glory. No great battle inspired it. Writing emerged because peaceful daily life had become wonderfully complex. People needed to remember. They needed accuracy. They needed trust. What began as a practical solution to keeping records would soon become something far greater than anyone could imagine. The small wedge-shaped marks pressed into soft clay would eventually preserve laws, prayers, mathematics, scientific observations, royal histories, and some of humanity's oldest surviving stories. But all of that still lies in the future. For now, inside the peaceful city of Uruk, a few careful hands continue pressing tiny symbols into fresh clay, unaware that they are giving humanity one of its greatest gifts. The first scribes and the language of clay. The sun has begun its slow descent across the wide Mesopotamian sky. Its golden light falls gently upon the temples of Uruk, warming the mud brick walls that have watched over the city for generations. Along the canals, fishermen pull their boats onto the shore after a quiet day on the water. Merchants return home carrying fewer goods than they brought that morning, pleased with another day of peaceful trade. Inside the city, however, another kind of work continues. Within the cool rooms of the temple complex, where thick mud brick walls protect against the afternoon heat, several men and young apprentices sit quietly with pieces of soft clay resting before them. Around them lie baskets filled with fresh tablets, carefully shaped and smoothed by hand. Nearby are bundles of reed styluses, each cut with great care so that its tip forms a small wedge. There is very little conversation. The room is filled instead with the gentle sounds of clay being pressed. Tap. Pause. Turn the stylus. Another careful mark. The work requires patience more than speed. These are the first scribes. Although later generations would regard them with great respect, their earliest responsibilities were surprisingly ordinary. They were not writing poems or recording the adventures of heroes. Their task was far more practical. They remembered what others could not. As Uruk continued to grow, every season brought more harvests to count, more workers to organize, more animals to care for, and more goods arriving from distant lands. The city's prosperity depended upon careful record-keeping, and memory alone was no longer enough. The scribes became the quiet guardians of information. Each morning they received reports from temple officials, merchants, farmers, and craftsmen. One farmer delivered 40 baskets of barley. Another brought 6 healthy sheep. A merchant unloaded copper ingots that had traveled hundreds of miles from distant mountains. Every transaction was carefully recorded. Every detail mattered. Unlike spoken words, the marks impressed into clay would remain long after the conversation had ended. Many of the young scribes had begun their training as children. Their education demanded remarkable patience. Instead of reading books, they learned by copying symbols onto fresh clay tablets again and again. A teacher would carefully impress a series of signs. The apprentice would attempt to copy them. Mistakes were quietly corrected. The process repeated day after day, month after month, and eventually year after year. There were no shortcuts. Each symbol required careful practice. Some represented grain. Others represented livestock. Some indicated numbers. Others referred to people, places, or occupations. Over time, the growing collection of symbols became increasingly sophisticated. What had once been simple pictures slowly evolved into abstract signs. This transformation happened gradually, almost unnoticed by those living through it. Early symbols often resembled the objects they represented. A fish looked somewhat like a fish. A jar resembled a jar. But repeatedly pressing pictures into soft clay proved slow and difficult. The wedge-shaped stylus naturally encouraged simpler forms. Straight impressions replaced detailed drawings. Curved lines became short wedges. Generation after generation, the symbols changed until they developed into the writing system we now call cuneiform, meaning wedge-shaped. It was perfectly suited to clay. The scribes quickly became highly respected members of society. Not because they were wealthy or powerful, but because they possessed a rare skill. Very few people could read or write. Most farmers, shepherds, fishermen, and craftsmen had little reason to learn. Their knowledge lived in their hands. They understood the soil, the rivers, the animals, and their chosen crafts. The scribes, however, preserved knowledge in another way. Their memories were transferred into clay. This made them indispensable. Temple administrators relied upon them. Merchants trusted them. Community leaders consulted them. Without the scribes, much of Uruk's growing administration would have become impossible. Imagine entering one of their workrooms on a peaceful afternoon. Sunlight filters softly through a small opening high in the wall. Clay tablets are stacked neatly upon wooden shelves, each one containing careful rows of wedge-shaped signs. Some record grain harvested many months earlier. Others list workers who repaired irrigation canals. A few describe deliveries of copper, wool, dates, or fish. Every tablet is part of the city's memory. No voices are needed. The clay remembers. One of the most remarkable qualities of these records is their honesty. Unlike monuments built to celebrate kings, these humble tablets tell us about ordinary life. They reveal what people ate, how they traded, how they worked, how many sheep grazed in nearby fields, how much barley was harvested after the floods. Because of these simple records, thousands of years later we are able to glimpse everyday life in the world's first city with surprising clarity. The scribes could never have imagined such a future. They believed they were recording information for their own generation. Instead, they left messages for people living more than 5,000 years later. Today, archaeologists continue discovering these tablets buried beneath the ruins of ancient Uruk. Many survived because clay, once dried or fired, becomes remarkably durable. While papyrus and parchment decay with time, baked clay often remains unchanged for thousands of years. The earth itself became their library. Every excavation uncovers another quiet voice from the distant past. Some tablets contain simple accounts. Others preserve school exercises completed by young apprentices still learning their craft. A few even contain mistakes, evidence that students struggled just as learners do today. These small imperfections make the ancient scribes feel wonderfully human. They were not distant legends. They were ordinary people patiently mastering an extraordinary skill. As the years passed, writing slowly expanded beyond accounting. Temple hymns began to be recorded. Religious ceremonies found permanent form upon clay. Important agreements no longer depended entirely upon memory. Knowledge could now travel beyond the lifetime of the person who first possessed it. A father could leave written instructions for a son. A temple could preserve records across generations. Ideas no longer disappeared when their creators passed away. For the first time in history, human knowledge had found a lasting home. This quiet invention would eventually influence nearly every civilization that followed. From Mesopotamia, writing spread and evolved in many different forms. Thousands of years later, alphabets would appear. Books would be written. Libraries would be built. History itself would be preserved. Yet every one of those achievements can trace its distant ancestry back to these peaceful rooms in ancient Uruk, where humble scribes pressed small wedge-shaped marks into soft clay beneath the warm Mesopotamian sun. As evening settles over the city, the scribes place their finished tablets aside to dry. Outside, the streets grow quieter. Families gather for their evening meals. The canals reflect the deep orange colors of the setting sun. The gentle sounds of birds returning to the marshes fill the cooling air. Uruk rests peacefully once more. But its story is only beginning. A walk through the streets of Uruk. The first light of morning spreads gently across the rooftops of Uruk. A soft golden glow slowly replaces the cool blue of the night, revealing a city that is already beginning to stir. The air is pleasantly cool for a little while longer, carrying the fresh scent of damp earth from the canals and the distant fragrance of date palms growing along the riverbanks. The stars have disappeared one by one, and the city awakens without haste. There are no loud bells announcing the beginning of the day. No hurried crowds rushing through the streets. Instead, life begins gradually, following the same peaceful rhythm that has guided the people of Uruk for countless generations. If we could quietly step into this remarkable city, careful not to disturb the people who live here, we would find ourselves standing near one of its narrow streets. The ground beneath our feet is firm but dusty. The road is not paved with stone as it would be in later civilizations. Instead, generations of footsteps have pressed the earth into smooth pathways winding gently between rows of mud brick houses. The streets are narrower than many modern roads. Some are just wide enough for two people carrying baskets to pass one another with a friendly greeting. Others open into small gathering spaces where neighbors pause to talk before continuing their daily work. The houses stand close together, their sun-dried brick walls glowing softly beneath the morning light. From the outside they appear simple. Many have few windows facing the street, protecting the families inside from both the intense summer heat and blowing dust carried across the plain. Their flat roofs stretch quietly above the lanes, supported by wooden beams covered with reeds and packed clay. Some families spend warm evenings upon these rooftops, enjoying the cooler air after sunset while watching the stars slowly appear overhead. A wooden door stands open nearby. Inside, a small courtyard forms the heart of the home. Here, much of daily life unfolds. Children play while their parents prepare food. Clay jars filled with grain stand neatly against the walls. Bundles of reeds wait to be woven into baskets or repaired roofing. A simple oven made from clay still holds the warmth of bread baked earlier that morning. The home is modest, yet it provides comfort and shelter. Everything inside has been carefully made or thoughtfully stored. Nothing is wasted. Water carried from the canals is kept in large clay vessels where it remains surprisingly cool. Nearby, woven baskets contain onions, lentils, barley, dried dates, and garlic gathered from recent harvests. Meals are simple but nourishing. Fresh bread accompanies thick barley porridge. Dates add natural sweetness. Vegetables from nearby gardens provide flavor and variety. Fish caught in the rivers often appear on the family table, while meat is reserved for special occasions or religious festivals. As the sun climbs higher, more people begin filling the streets. A potter carefully balances newly fired vessels upon a wooden cart. Their smooth surfaces catch the morning light as he slowly makes his way toward the marketplace. Nearby, a woman carries a basket of freshly baked bread balanced gracefully upon her head. She smiles warmly as neighbors greet her along the way. Children hurry past carrying small clay water jars, eager to help their families before the day's heat becomes too strong. There is a quiet sense of purpose everywhere. Nobody seems rushed. Every person understands their role within the community. As we continue walking, we hear the steady sound of grain being ground between large stone querns. Inside many homes, women kneel patiently beside these heavy stones, slowly crushing barley into fine flour. The rhythmic scraping of stone against stone blends with the distant sounds of birds singing among the date palms. It is one of the most familiar sounds in Uruk. Nearby, an elderly craftsman sits outside his workshop carving a wooden handle for a farming tool. Years of experience have made his movements calm and precise. Beside him, a young apprentice watches closely, learning not through written instructions but through careful observation. Knowledge passes quietly from one generation to the next. The streets gradually become busier as the morning continues. Merchants arrive carrying woven baskets filled with goods brought from surrounding villages. Farmers lead donkeys loaded with sacks of barley. Fishermen return from the canals carrying fresh catches still glistening in the sunlight. Potters display rows of beautifully shaped jars whose smooth curves reveal years of patient practice. Every object tells a story of careful craftsmanship. Every trade strengthens the community. Although Uruk has grown into the largest city the world has ever known, it never feels chaotic. Its neighborhoods have developed naturally over many generations. Families know one another well. Neighbors share tools, exchange news, and help repair homes damaged by heavy rain or seasonal floods. Children wander safely between familiar houses while elders rest beneath shaded courtyards, offering gentle advice to younger generations. Community remains the foundation of daily life. As we walk farther, the scent of baking bread gradually gives way to another familiar aroma. Fresh clay. Near the edge of one neighborhood, several potters work together beneath simple shelters made from wooden poles and woven reeds. Large piles of river clay lie beside them, still damp from careful preparation. One craftsman shapes a graceful storage jar upon a slow-turning wheel, his hands moving with remarkable confidence. Another carefully decorates smaller bowls using simple geometric patterns. Nearby, rows of finished pottery dry quietly beneath the morning sun before being placed into kilns for firing. These vessels will soon carry grain, oil, water, and wine throughout the city. Without the potters, daily life would become much more difficult. Farther along the street, the gentle ringing of copper tools catches our attention. A metalworker carefully hammers softened copper into the shape of a small blade. The work requires patience. Each strike is deliberate. There is no unnecessary force. Only steady, practiced movements refined over many years. People pause to admire his work before continuing toward the marketplace. As midday approaches, the warmth of the sun becomes more noticeable. Many residents seek shade beneath awnings stretched across busy streets or rest for a short while inside the cool courtyards of their homes. The thick mud brick walls, so carefully constructed by generations of builders, protect families from the worst of the afternoon heat. It is another quiet reminder that the people of Uruk have learned to live in harmony with their environment. They understand the land. They understand the rivers. And they understand the rhythm of the seasons. Every part of the city reflects this wisdom. Nothing has been built without purpose. Nothing exists without serving the needs of the community. As we pause for a moment beneath the shade of a date palm, we begin to appreciate something truly remarkable. 5,000 years separate us from these people. Their language is different. Their clothing is unfamiliar. Their world seems unimaginably distant. Yet their hopes feel surprisingly familiar. Parents want their children to grow safely. Craftsmen take pride in their work. Neighbors greet one another kindly. Families gather each evening to share food and conversation. Across the vast distance of time, these simple moments remind us that although civilizations rise and fall, the quiet rhythms of everyday life remain deeply human. As the afternoon slowly unfolds, we continue our peaceful walk through the world's first great city. Soon, we will arrive at the heart of Uruk itself, a place where towering temples rise above the rooftops, markets overflow with goods from distant lands, and the life of the entire city comes together. The heart of the first city. The afternoon sun hangs peacefully above the city of Uruk. Its warm light falls gently across the rooftops, where mud brick homes glow in soft shades of gold and amber. A quiet breeze drifts through the narrow streets, carrying with it the scent of fresh bread, sun-dried clay, and the sweet fragrance of ripening dates. The sounds of the morning have softened now. The busiest hours of the marketplace are passing, and the city seems to settle into a slower, calmer rhythm. As we continue our gentle walk, the streets begin to widen. The houses become less crowded, and before long, the city's most important buildings come into view. Rising above the rooftops is the sacred heart of Uruk, the great temple precinct. Long before magnificent stone temples appeared in Egypt or Greece, the people of Uruk had already begun building impressive religious monuments from millions of carefully shaped mud bricks. These temples stood upon large raised platforms, lifting them high above the surrounding city. From almost anywhere in Uruk, they could be seen. Their broad walls caught the sunlight throughout the day, while colorful clay cones pressed into the outer surfaces created beautiful geometric patterns that shimmered softly in the light. To those approaching the city from across the open plains, the temples must have seemed like landmarks rising from the earth itself. The largest and most beloved of these sacred places was dedicated to Inanna, the goddess of love, fertility, and war. For the people of Uruk, Inanna was far more than a distant deity. She was believed to watch over the city, protect its people, and bless the land with prosperity. Each day, priests and priestesses quietly prepared offerings within the temple. Fresh bread, dates gathered from nearby palm groves, barley from the latest harvest, milk, butter, fish, and fragrant oils. These gifts were placed with great care before the sacred spaces, not because the gods required food, but because gratitude was woven deeply into everyday life. The ceremonies were calm and orderly. Soft prayers echoed through shaded courtyards while incense drifted gently upward into the warm afternoon air. Visitors arrived throughout the day. Some came to give thanks for a successful harvest. Others prayed for healthy children or protection during an upcoming journey. Many simply paused for a few quiet moments before returning to their daily work. The temple was more than a place of worship. It was the heart of the community. Nearby stood large storehouses built from thick mud bricks. Inside them rested thousands of baskets filled with barley, jars of oil, bundles of wool, dried dates, and many other goods collected throughout the year. These storehouses protected the city's food supply against difficult seasons. If floods damaged the harvest or drought reduced the crops, these carefully managed reserves could help the people endure until better times returned. Temple officials also organized much of the city's daily life. Workers repairing canals received food from these stores. Builders constructing new public buildings were supplied with grain and oil. Craftsmen creating tools or pottery often exchanged their work through the temple's administration. Rather than functioning only as a religious center, the temple quietly supported the entire community. As we continue walking through the precinct, we notice groups of scribes seated beneath shaded porticos. Fresh clay tablets rest upon their laps. Bundles of reed styluses lie beside them. With calm concentration, they record deliveries of grain, count livestock, and keep careful accounts of goods entering and leaving the storehouses. The gentle tapping of reed against clay fills the air. Each small impression becomes another piece of the city's memory. Nearby, apprentices watch their teachers closely. Their tablets are covered with rows of carefully copied symbols. Some hesitate before making each mark. Others smile quietly after completing a difficult sign correctly. Learning to write is slow work. But every lesson strengthens the knowledge that future generations will inherit. Beyond the temple, the marketplace remains alive with quiet activity. It is not a place of shouting or hurried bargaining. Instead, conversations unfold patiently. A merchant from a distant settlement unloads copper ingots carried along the Euphrates. Another displays polished shells gathered from the Persian Gulf hundreds of miles to the south. A trader carefully unwraps brilliant blue lapis lazuli brought across mountains and deserts from lands far to the east. For many people of Uruk, these objects are glimpses of a world they will never personally visit. Children stop beside their parents, staring with wide eyes at unfamiliar treasures. Elders exchange stories with travelers who describe distant rivers, foreign villages, and landscapes unlike the flat plains of Mesopotamia. Although Uruk feels immense to its inhabitants, the city is quietly becoming part of a much larger world. Trade connects people across astonishing distances. Ideas travel alongside goods. New farming methods. Different styles of pottery. Fresh techniques for weaving cloth or shaping copper. Knowledge flows through the marketplace just as surely as the rivers flow through the countryside. As the afternoon begins to fade, many craftsmen return to their workshops. Potters carefully remove cooled vessels from their kilns. Weavers fold newly finished textiles. Carpenters gather their tools before heading home. The city slowly relaxes after another productive day. Children once again fill the streets. Their laughter echoes between the mud-brick walls as they invent games with clay balls, sticks, and smooth stones gathered from the river banks. For a little while, work is forgotten. Families begin preparing the evening meal. The aroma of warm bread drifts once more through the neighborhoods. Barley porridge simmers gently over clay ovens. Fresh onions and lentils are added to simple stews. Fish caught earlier that day roast slowly above glowing embers. Neighbors exchange small gifts of food, just as they have done for generations. Hospitality remains one of the quiet strengths of the community. As the sun approaches the horizon, its golden light softens into deep shades of orange and crimson. Long shadows stretch across the streets. The great temples glow beautifully beneath the evening sky. Birds return to the marshes. The canals reflect the colors of sunset like ribbons of polished bronze. Families gather upon their rooftops or within shaded courtyards to escape the lingering warmth of the day. Grandparents begin telling familiar stories. Children listen carefully, their eyes fixed upon the first stars appearing overhead. Some stories speak of brave ancestors. Others tell of the powerful gods who shaped the rivers and watched over the city. And among these tales, one name is slowly becoming known throughout Uruk: Gilgamesh. Whether every story about him is true, no one can yet say. But his name is beginning to pass from one household to another, carried by storytellers as evening settles across the city. Soon, the people of Uruk will remember him as their greatest king. His adventures, friendships, triumphs, and search for wisdom will become one of humanity's oldest surviving epics. Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk. Night slowly gives way to morning once again. A pale blue light appears above the eastern horizon, and the city of Uruk awakens beneath another peaceful dawn. The canals reflect the first colors of the sky, while birds glide silently over the marshes before settling among the reeds. The cool air carries the scent of damp earth, and for a few quiet moments, the world's first great city seems almost timeless. The people of Uruk begin another ordinary day. Farmers walk toward their fields. Potters prepare fresh clay beside their workshops. Merchants untie their boats along the river banks. Priests quietly enter the temple courtyards. Children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, follow their parents as the city slowly comes to life. Everything feels familiar. Yet among the many stories shared in homes and marketplaces, one name is spoken with particular respect: Gilgamesh. Even today, more than 4,000 years after his lifetime, historians continue to ask the same question. Was Gilgamesh a real king? Or was he only a legend? The answer appears to lie somewhere between history and memory. Most scholars believe that Gilgamesh was indeed a historical ruler of Uruk, likely living around 2700 BCE, during the city's early period of greatness. Over many centuries, stories about his life grew larger with each generation. Like ripples spreading across still water, simple memories slowly became extraordinary legends. By the time scribes finally wrote these stories onto clay tablets, Gilgamesh had become much more than a king. He had become a symbol, a reminder of strength, leadership, curiosity, and the deeply human search for meaning. Imagine, for a moment, that we are standing beside one of Uruk's great city gates as the morning sun rises. The streets are beginning to fill with people. Merchants greet one another warmly. Children chase each other through the narrow lanes. Nearby, workers prepare mud bricks for another construction project. Then, quietly, a small procession appears. At its center walks the ruler of Uruk. He wears finely woven garments suitable for his position, though not the jeweled crowns that later artists would often imagine. Around him are trusted officials, guards, and temple attendants. As he passes, many citizens bow their heads with quiet respect. Not because they fear him, but because they see him as the guardian of their city. To rule Uruk was no simple responsibility. The city had grown beyond anything humanity had experienced before. Thousands of people depended upon careful leadership. The canals required constant maintenance. The harvests had to be protected. Trade with distant settlements needed organization. Temples required supplies for daily worship. Disagreements between citizens demanded fair judgment. Every decision affected countless lives. A ruler could not simply think about today. He had to consider the seasons yet to come. This was the burden carried by every king of Uruk. Whether Gilgamesh accomplished everything later legends claimed is impossible to know. Yet archaeological discoveries suggest that Uruk continued to flourish during the period traditionally associated with his reign. Its great walls were strengthened. Its temples expanded. Its influence reached farther across Mesopotamia. The people remembered these achievements. Over time, memory transformed into story. One of the most famous traditions speaks of the enormous walls surrounding Uruk. According to later accounts, Gilgamesh himself ordered their construction. The walls were said to stretch for many kilometers, built from countless sun-dried bricks carefully laid one upon another. Whether he personally directed their construction or not, such defenses represented remarkable engineering for their time. They protected the city's people, its temples, its storehouses, and its precious harvests. Imagine walking along the top of these walls as the afternoon breeze blows gently across the plain. Below lies the bustling city. Beyond it stretch endless fields of barley and winding irrigation canals shimmering beneath the sunlight. Farther still, the rivers continue their patient journey toward the sea. From this height, it becomes clear why Uruk had become so important. It was more than a city. It was the heart of an entire region. Yet the stories of Gilgamesh are not remembered simply because he built walls or governed wisely. They endure because they speak about something far more universal. They speak about being human. The oldest storytellers described Gilgamesh as incredibly strong, courageous, and determined. But they also described him as proud. Like many rulers throughout history, he still had much to learn. Power alone could not bring wisdom. Strength alone could not create happiness. These lessons would become the heart of the great epic that later generations preserved upon clay tablets. As evening approached in ancient Uruk, families often gathered outside their homes after the heat of the day had passed. Oil lamps flickered softly in courtyards. Children sat quietly beside their grandparents. Travelers rested after long journeys. It was during these peaceful evenings that storytellers shared tales of their city's remarkable king. No books were needed. No written pages. Only careful voices passing memories from one generation to the next. Each storyteller added small details. Each listener remembered the parts that touched their heart most deeply. Over centuries, these quiet evenings shaped one of humanity's oldest surviving works of literature. The people listening beneath the stars could never have imagined that thousands of years later, those same stories would still be read across the world. Their city would one day become buried beneath layers of earth. Its temples would crumble. Its streets would fall silent. Yet the name Gilgamesh would survive. Not because of armies. Not because of conquest. But because stories, like rivers, continue flowing long after those who first told them are gone. As darkness settles gently over Uruk once more, the city grows quiet. The canals reflect the moonlight. A cool breeze moves softly through the date palms. Somewhere, an elder begins another familiar tale. Children lean forward, eager to hear what happens next. For the greatest story of Gilgamesh has not yet begun. The epic that outlived the city. The evening settles gently over Uruk. The last rays of the sun fade behind the distant horizon, leaving the city wrapped in the soft blue light of twilight. One by one, small oil lamps begin to glow inside the homes of families scattered across the narrow streets. Their warm light flickers through open doorways, while the quiet sounds of conversation drift into the cooling air. The day's work has come to an end. Farmers have returned from the fields. Merchants have packed away their goods. Potters have covered their clay to keep it moist until morning. The canals flow as peacefully as ever, reflecting the first stars that now appear above the ancient city. This is the hour for stories. Long before books filled libraries or printed pages carried tales across the world, stories lived in the voices of people. Parents told them to their children. Travelers shared them beside evening fires. Elders repeated them year after year until they became part of the memory of an entire civilization. Among all the stories told in Uruk, none became more beloved than the tale of Gilgamesh. At first, these stories existed only in spoken words. Each storyteller remembered them slightly differently. One emphasized the king's great strength. Another spoke of his wisdom. Others focused on the lessons hidden within his adventures. With every generation, the story grew richer, not because people wished to change history, but because they wished to preserve its meaning. Eventually, the scribes of Mesopotamia did something remarkable. Using the writing system that had first developed in Uruk, they carefully pressed the story into clay tablets. For the first time, the adventures of Gilgamesh could outlive the voices that told them. The story itself became permanent. Today, we know this work as the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving works of literature in human history. Although the version discovered by archaeologists was written centuries after the historical king may have lived, its roots stretch back to the traditions of ancient Uruk itself. Imagine entering the quiet room of a temple scribe. Fresh clay tablets lie neatly arranged upon a wooden shelf. One by one, the scribe carefully presses tiny wedge-shaped signs into the damp surface. Every mark must be accurate. A single mistake could change the meaning of an entire passage. There is no sound except the gentle tapping of the reed stylus and the distant calls of birds outside the temple walls. The work is slow, patient, almost meditative. The scribe knows that these words may be read by people he will never meet. Perhaps by his own grandchildren. Perhaps by future generations yet unborn. Without realizing it, he is creating one of humanity's greatest treasures. The story itself is both adventurous and deeply thoughtful. It tells of Gilgamesh, the mighty king of Uruk, and his unlikely friendship with a wild man named Enkidu. Together they journey through forests, face terrifying creatures, and accomplish feats that ordinary people could scarcely imagine. Yet beneath these exciting adventures lies a quieter message. The Epic of Gilgamesh is not truly about defeating monsters. It is about understanding life. It asks questions that people still ask today. Why do we lose those we love? Why does life seem so short? What gives our days meaning? Can anyone truly escape death? These questions are as old as civilization itself. Perhaps that is why the story has never been forgotten. After Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh is overcome with grief. For the first time, the powerful king realizes that even the strongest ruler cannot avoid mortality. His sorrow leads him on a long journey in search of eternal life. He travels across deserts. He crosses dangerous mountains. He sails over mysterious waters. He meets wise men who have witnessed countless generations come and go. Along the way, Gilgamesh slowly discovers that everlasting life is not the greatest gift. Instead, what endures is the good we leave behind. Our kindness. Our friendships. Our wisdom. Our cities. Our stories. This quiet lesson has echoed through more than 4,000 years of history. It is one of the reasons the Epic of Gilgamesh continues to move readers even today. For the people of ancient Uruk, however, these lessons were more than literature. They reflected everyday life. Every family experienced joy and sorrow. Children grew into adults. Parents grew old. The seasons changed. Harvest followed harvest. Life moved forward, just as the rivers continued flowing toward the sea. The story reminded people that while individual lives are brief, the work we do together can endure for generations. As we look around Uruk once more, we can almost understand why this message mattered so deeply. The canals still carry water across the fields. The temples still rise above the rooftops. Craftsmen continue shaping clay. Merchants continue welcoming travelers from distant lands. Children laugh in the narrow streets. The city itself has become a living symbol of cooperation across many generations. No single person built Uruk. No single ruler created its greatness. Thousands of ordinary people contributed their skills, their patience, and their hopes. Farmers cultivated the land. Builders shaped millions of mud bricks. Potters fired countless vessels. Scribes preserved knowledge. Priests offered guidance. Merchants connected distant cultures. Each played a small part in something far greater than themselves. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Civilization is not created by extraordinary individuals alone. It grows quietly through the steady efforts of ordinary people working together across centuries. As darkness settles completely over the city, the streets become peaceful once more. The moon rises above the temple roofs. Its silver light reflects gently upon the canals. Somewhere in the distance, an elder finishes telling the story of Gilgamesh. The children listening are quiet. Some are already drifting toward sleep. Others continue gazing at the stars, wondering about the great king who searched for immortality and instead discovered wisdom. None of them can know that thousands of years later, people across the world will still remember his name. Not because he conquered every enemy. Not because he found eternal life. But because the people of Uruk chose to preserve his story. The city that gave birth to writing had also given humanity one of its first great epics. Its words would survive long after its walls had crumbled. Its lessons would outlive the empire that followed. And as our own journey through Uruk continues, we now leave the world of legend behind and return to history itself. As the centuries passed, the sun rises once more over the ancient city of Uruk. Its first light gently touches the tops of the temples before slowly spreading across the quiet streets below. The familiar canals shimmer with soft reflections of the morning sky, and a cool breeze moves through the date palms that have watched over this land for generations. At first glance, very little seems different. Farmers still leave for their fields before the day's heat arrives. Potters shape fresh clay with patient hands. Fishermen guide their reed boats across calm waterways. Children chase one another through narrow streets, their laughter echoing between mud brick homes. Life continues, just as it has for centuries. And yet, time is quietly changing everything. Unlike a storm that arrives suddenly or a flood that transforms the landscape overnight, the passing of centuries is almost impossible to notice while it is happening. One child grows into an elder. A small house is rebuilt. A canal is widened. A new generation plants trees that another generation will harvest. Each change seems small on its own. But together, they slowly reshape an entire civilization. Uruk has now stood for many centuries. The city that once began as a modest farming settlement has become one of the most influential places in the ancient world. Its innovations have spread far beyond its walls. Writing is now used in other Mesopotamian cities. Trade routes stretch across mountains, deserts, and seas. New settlements have grown into thriving cities of their own. The ideas first nurtured in Uruk no longer belong only to Uruk. They have become part of the wider world. Imagine standing beside one of the city's busy canals during the middle of the day. Boats continue to arrive carrying familiar goods. Barley from nearby farms. Timber from northern lands. Copper from distant mountains. Stone, shells, wool, and finely crafted pottery. Yet the faces upon these boats are changing. Many travelers now come from cities that did not even exist when Uruk was first beginning to grow. Places such as Ur, Kish, Lagash, Nippur, and Eridu have become important centers in their own right. Each city develops its own traditions, rulers, temples, and craftsmen. Mesopotamia is becoming a landscape filled with thriving city-states. Rather than standing alone, Uruk now shares the stage with many neighbors. This is a sign not of failure, but of success. The idea of city life has taken root. What began here has inspired countless others. The people of Uruk may not think of themselves as changing history. They simply continue living their lives. Farmers still depend upon the rivers. Merchants still welcome visitors. Priests continue offering prayers within the temples. Scribes still press wedge-shaped symbols into soft clay. Yet the world beyond the city is growing more connected every generation. Travelers bring unfamiliar languages. New artistic styles appear in workshops. Different methods of construction spread between neighboring cities. Knowledge travels almost as easily as goods. As afternoon sunlight warms the city, we wander once more through its neighborhoods. Some houses have stood for generations. Others have recently been rebuilt after seasonal floods or simple wear caused by time. Mud bricks, though remarkably useful, require constant care. Walls are repaired. Roofs are strengthened. Canals are cleared of silt. Nothing lasts forever without attention. Perhaps this is one of the quiet lessons Uruk teaches us. Civilization is never finished. It must be cared for every day. The city's temples also continue to evolve. Older buildings are repaired or expanded. Sometimes an entirely new structure rises upon the foundations of an earlier one. Each generation leaves its own mark without completely erasing the work of those who came before. The city becomes a layered record of countless human lives. Beneath every street lie the remains of older streets. Beneath every rebuilt house rest the foundations of an earlier home. History quietly accumulates beneath the feet of those who walk above it. Few people ever stop to think about this. They are busy with ordinary concerns. Preparing meals. harvesting crops, repairing tools, raising children, planning for the next season. Yet every ordinary day adds another page to the long story of Uruk. As evening approaches, the marketplace grows quieter. Merchants begin packing away their remaining goods. A shepherd counts his flock before guiding them home. The smell of fresh bread drifts once again through the streets. Children return to their families as the first stars appear above the city. Everything feels peaceful. But far beyond the horizon, new kingdoms are slowly rising. Powerful rulers dream of expanding their influence. Trade networks grow larger. Neighboring cities become increasingly important. The ancient world is changing. Uruk will always remain respected as one of the oldest and greatest cities ever built. Yet history never stands still. Every civilization, no matter how remarkable, eventually shares the world with those that follow. The people of Uruk cannot yet know what lies ahead. They continue living with quiet confidence, believing that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. For many years, they will be right. But time has its own gentle rhythm. Just as rivers slowly reshape the land through patience rather than force, history quietly reshapes civilizations one generation at a time. The quiet legacy of a changing city. The evening settles gently over Uruk once again. The warmth of the day slowly begins to fade, and a cool breeze drifts across the wide plains of southern Mesopotamia. The canals, which only a few hours earlier reflected the bright blue of the afternoon sky, now shimmer with shades of amber and deep gold. Birds return to the marshes, disappearing into the tall reeds where they will rest for the night. One by one, the sounds of busy workshops grow quiet as craftsmen carefully put away their tools until another sunrise. For the people of Uruk, it feels like an ordinary evening. Families gather inside peaceful courtyards to share their final meal of the day. Fresh bread is broken and passed from hand to hand. Bowls of barley porridge are placed upon woven mats. Dates, onions, lentils, and fish from the nearby canals provide a simple but satisfying supper. Children eagerly tell stories of what they saw in the marketplace, while grandparents smile gently, remembering that they once shared those same childhood adventures. The city seems timeless. Its great temples still rise proudly above the rooftops. The canals continue carrying life through every neighborhood. Merchants still arrive from distant lands. Farmers still tend the fertile fields beyond the city walls. Yet beneath this comforting rhythm, history is quietly moving forward. Unlike the changing of the seasons, the transformation of civilizations is almost impossible to notice while it is happening. Years become decades. Decades become centuries. One generation follows another with such quiet certainty that few people pause to wonder how much their world has changed. Children born today will one day become elders. The houses they help build will shelter families they will never meet. The trees they plant will provide shade long after they are gone. In this gentle way, time slowly reshapes every city. Uruk is no exception. As neighboring cities continue to grow, the balance of power across Mesopotamia gradually begins to change. Places such as Ur, Lagash, Kish, and later Babylon become increasingly important. Their rulers expand irrigation systems, strengthen trade, and build magnificent temples of their own. Travelers who once journeyed only to Uruk now have many destinations to choose from. This is not the result of disaster. It is the natural growth of civilization itself. The ideas first developed in Uruk have taken root across the land. Writing is now used by many cities. Large temples stand in settlements throughout Mesopotamia. Organized governments manage canals, collect harvests, and oversee trade. The pattern first woven in Uruk has spread like ripples across a quiet lake. In many ways, this is the city's greatest achievement. Its influence has become so widespread that it no longer belongs to Uruk alone. As we quietly walk through the city once more, we notice subtle changes. The marketplace remains lively, but many of the goods now come from cities that have become prosperous in their own right. A merchant proudly displays finely woven textiles from distant workshops. Another offers beautifully crafted metal tools made elsewhere in Mesopotamia. Ideas, styles, and inventions move freely between cities, enriching them all. Competition exists, but so does cooperation. Caravans continue crossing deserts. Boats continue sailing along the Euphrates. The rivers remain faithful companions, just as they have always been. Inside the temples, scribes continue their careful work. Fresh clay tablets are placed upon wooden shelves. Records are kept with the same patience shown by generations before them. Although the handwriting changes slightly over the centuries, the quiet purpose remains the same: to preserve knowledge, to remember, to leave a record for those who will come later. None of the scribes can know just how successful they will be. Their clay tablets will survive floods, fires, abandoned buildings, and the passing of thousands of years. Buried beneath layers of earth, they will sleep silently until archaeologists uncover them in a distant future. What seems like an ordinary day's work will one day become one of history's greatest treasures. The city itself also continues to change. Old buildings are repaired many times. Some temples are expanded. Others are rebuilt entirely upon the foundations of older structures. Each generation leaves its own mark while quietly preserving much of what came before. Walking through Uruk would be like walking through many centuries at once. A wall built by a grandfather might support a roof repaired by his grandson. A canal first dug by forgotten ancestors still carries water to fields worked by new families. Nothing is entirely new. Nothing is entirely old. Everything belongs to a continuous story. As evening deepens, the sounds of the city soften even further. A shepherd closes the gate to a small animal enclosure. A mother sings a gentle lullaby to her child. The last merchant rolls up a woven mat after another successful day of trade. From somewhere within the temple precinct, quiet prayers rise into the cooling night air. Above it all, countless stars appear once again. The same stars that shone over the first farmers. The same stars that watched the rise of Uruk. The same stars beneath which scribes pressed the first written words into soft clay. They remain unchanged while generations come and go below them. Perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons hidden within the story of Uruk. No city lasts forever. No kingdom remains unchanged. Even the greatest achievements of humanity eventually become part of history. Yet this is not a reason for sadness. It is simply the rhythm of time. Just as the rivers continue flowing without ever holding the same water twice, civilizations also move gently forward. Each one learns from those before it. Each one leaves something behind for those who follow. Uruk's greatest gift was never its walls, nor its temples, nor even its wealth. Its greatest gift was an idea. The idea that thousands of people could live together, work together, share knowledge, build monuments, create laws, preserve history, and shape a future greater than any single generation could imagine. That idea never disappeared. It traveled far beyond the city's boundaries. It inspired new cities, new kingdoms, and eventually the countless towns and great capitals that fill our modern world. In many ways, every city that exists today carries a small part of Uruk within it. The marketplaces where strangers meet. The public buildings where decisions are made. The written records that preserve our history. The neighborhoods where families gather each evening. These everyday experiences have roots stretching back more than 5,000 years to this peaceful place between the Tigris and Euphrates. As the night grows deeper, Uruk becomes wonderfully still. Only the quiet sound of flowing water remains. The canals continue their patient journey beneath the moonlight, just as they have done for countless generations. The people sleep peacefully, unaware that their city will be remembered long after its streets fall silent. Thousands of years from now, travelers from every corner of the world will stand among these ancient ruins, trying to imagine the voices that once filled these streets. Archaeologists will carefully brush away the dust, uncovering temples, homes, workshops, and thousands of clay tablets that patiently waited beneath the earth. Historians will read those ancient records and slowly piece together the remarkable story of the world's first great city. And through their work, Uruk will live once more. Not as a bustling city of mud brick houses and busy canals, but as a timeless reminder of where urban civilization truly began. The silent ruins and an endless legacy. The sun rises over southern Iraq much as it has for thousands of years. The first light spreads slowly across the broad plain, touching the dry earth with soft shades of gold. A gentle breeze moves across the open landscape, carrying tiny grains of sand that drift quietly over weathered mounds of ancient mud brick. There are no bustling marketplaces now. No fishermen guiding reed boats through busy canals. No merchants unloading baskets of grain beside the river. The voices of Uruk have long since fallen silent. If you were standing here today, you might find it difficult to believe that this peaceful landscape was once the heart of the world's first great city. At first glance, there seems to be very little to see. Low hills rise gently from the plain, covered with fragments of ancient pottery and broken bricks baked beneath the Mesopotamian sun thousands of years ago. Wild grasses grow wherever the wind has carried their seeds. Birds circle quietly overhead before disappearing into the distance. The city itself is gone. And yet, somehow, it remains. This is one of history's quietest mysteries. How can a place disappear while its influence continues to shape the lives of people who have never even heard its name? To understand that answer, we must imagine the countless generations that passed after Uruk's greatest days. The rivers slowly changed their courses. Trade routes shifted toward newer cities. Powerful kingdoms rose and fell across Mesopotamia. The Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and many others would one day rule these lands. Each civilization built something new. Each inherited something old. Uruk gradually became smaller. Its once crowded neighborhoods emptied little by little. Workshops closed. Storehouses stood quiet. Some temples were abandoned, while others continued serving small communities that remained nearby. There was no single day when the city suddenly vanished. Instead, its story came to a gentle close over many centuries. Nature slowly reclaimed what people had built. Wind carried dust into empty streets. Rain softened neglected mud brick walls. Buildings collapsed one layer at a time. New generations settled elsewhere, leaving behind the homes their ancestors had known. The city returned to the earth from which it had first risen. There is something strangely peaceful about this process. Nothing in nature lasts forever. Trees grow, flourish, and eventually fall, nourishing the soil for new life. Rivers carve new paths through the landscape. Even mountains slowly change over immense stretches of time. Cities are no different. Uruk reminds us that every human achievement, no matter how magnificent, is part of a larger cycle. But while its buildings slowly disappeared, its ideas continued their journey. Writing spread across Mesopotamia and eventually inspired countless later writing systems. Organized government evolved through later kingdoms. Large-scale trade connected distant cultures across continents. Urban planning continued improving with each new civilization. The simple idea that thousands of people could live together within an organized city became one of humanity's defining achievements. Every great city that followed inherited something from Uruk. When ancient Babylon built its magnificent walls. When Egyptian scribes recorded the history of their pharaohs. When Greek philosophers gathered within bustling cities. When Roman engineers designed roads connecting an empire. Each was building upon foundations laid thousands of years earlier in Mesopotamia. Most never realized it. History often works quietly. Ideas travel farther than armies. Knowledge survives longer than monuments. A simple invention, shared patiently from one generation to another, can outlive entire empires. Perhaps nowhere is this more beautifully illustrated than through writing. The first clay tablets created in Uruk were never intended to become priceless historical treasures. They recorded harvests, livestock, trade, daily responsibilities, ordinary moments. Yet because those humble records survived, the people of Uruk continue speaking to us across 5,000 years. Without them, we would know almost nothing about the first city. Sometimes the smallest actions leave the longest shadows. As the morning sun climbs higher above the ruins, archaeologists continue their careful work. Armed not with swords or royal authority, but with brushes, notebooks, measuring tools, and extraordinary patience, they gently uncover the forgotten remains buried beneath layers of earth. Every broken pot tells part of a story. Every foundation reveals another building. Every clay tablet adds another sentence to humanity's oldest chapter of urban life. Excavation is slow work. A single day may uncover only a few centimeters of history. But patience has always been one of archaeology's greatest strengths. Much like the ancient scribes, archaeologists understand that careful attention to small details eventually reveals something far greater. As afternoon light spreads across the site, visitors occasionally walk among the ancient mounds. There are no towering palaces remaining. No complete temples reaching toward the sky. Instead, imagination fills the spaces where buildings once stood. One visitor pictures busy marketplaces. Another imagines children playing beside canals. Someone else wonders where the first scribe may have pressed a reed stylus into soft clay. The ruins invite quiet reflection rather than loud excitement. Standing there, it becomes easy to understand that civilization is not only measured by the buildings we leave behind. It is measured by the ideas we pass forward. Uruk's greatest monuments were never its walls. Its greatest monument was the human imagination. The courage to experiment, to organize, to cooperate, to record knowledge, to dream of a future larger than the present. Those achievements cannot crumble into dust. They continue living inside every city built since. As the day slowly approaches evening, long shadows stretch across the peaceful ruins. The same sun that once warmed the shoulders of farmers, merchants, scribes, priests, and children now shines upon quiet earth where they once lived. The wind whispers gently across broken bricks that have rested here for millennia. Time has carried away the city itself. But it has never carried away its story. The city that never truly disappeared. The first light of dawn slowly spreads across the ancient plains of southern Mesopotamia. The sky begins as a deep shade of indigo before gradually softening into pale blue and warm gold. A cool morning breeze moves gently across the open landscape, stirring the dry grasses that now grow where busy streets once echoed with thousands of footsteps. The air is quiet, almost unbelievably quiet, broken only by the distant songs of birds greeting another peaceful sunrise. Before us lie the silent ruins of Uruk. To an untrained eye, they may appear to be nothing more than low earthen mounds scattered across the desert. Fragments of broken pottery glimmer faintly in the sunlight. Pieces of ancient mud brick, once carefully shaped by skilled hands more than 5,000 years ago, rest where they have fallen after centuries of wind and rain. Nothing here seems grand. There are no towering palaces. No magnificent statues standing proudly above the landscape. No crowded markets filled with merchants calling to passing travelers. The city has long since surrendered itself to time. And yet, if we close our eyes for just a moment, another world slowly begins to emerge. Imagine the same place thousands of years earlier. The morning air is cool. The canals are full of clear water flowing gently toward the fields. Smoke rises from hundreds of cooking fires as families prepare fresh barley bread for breakfast. Children laugh as they hurry through narrow streets carrying small clay jars of water. Merchants untie their boats along the riverbanks while craftsmen unlock the wooden doors of their workshops. The temples catch the first rays of sunlight, glowing softly above the city they have watched over for generations. The sound of reed styluses pressing into damp clay drifts from nearby rooms where scribes begin recording another ordinary day's events. Life is everywhere. Not loud. Not hurried. Simply alive. Then, slowly, we open our eyes once more. The voices are gone. Only the wind remains. This quiet contrast reminds us of one of history's greatest truths. Every civilization, no matter how powerful or successful, eventually changes. The people of Uruk never imagined that their city would one day become a place remembered only through archaeology and history books. To them, Uruk simply felt permanent. Children believed the temples had always stood there. Grandparents expected future generations to walk the same familiar streets. Farmers trusted the rivers to nourish the fields just as they always had. Life seemed wonderfully predictable. But history rarely stands still. Over many centuries, the rivers gradually shifted their courses. Trade routes found new directions. Neighboring cities grew stronger. Political power moved from one kingdom to another. The great centers of Mesopotamia continued changing as new rulers, new ideas, and new ambitions shaped the ancient world. Uruk did not disappear overnight. There was no single dramatic battle that erased it from history. Instead, its transformation happened slowly, almost gently. A workshop closed because fewer customers arrived. A family chose to settle in another city where new opportunities awaited. An old canal filled with silt and was never fully repaired. A neighborhood became quieter than it had once been. Generation after generation, these small changes slowly accumulated. The city aged gracefully. Some temples continued serving local communities for centuries. Others fell into quiet silence. Buildings collapsed, not because of violence, but because mud brick always returns to the earth if left untended. The people who remained simply adapted to a changing world. It was the same peaceful rhythm that had guided Uruk since its beginning. Change had always been part of life. The seasons changed. The rivers changed. Families changed. Now, the city itself was changing. Yet something extraordinary had already happened. Long before its streets grew quiet, Uruk had given humanity gifts that could never be buried beneath the sand. It had shown that thousands of people could live together in an organized community. It had demonstrated the importance of irrigation, cooperation, and shared responsibility. It had nurtured some of the earliest forms of writing. It had inspired one of humanity's oldest surviving works of literature. These achievements did not remain inside the city walls. They traveled. Merchants carried ideas alongside their goods. Scribes taught new generations. Travelers shared stories wherever they went. Students learned from teachers who themselves had inherited knowledge reaching back to Uruk. Like seeds carried by the wind, the city's greatest accomplishment spread far beyond the place where they had first taken root. Sometimes we imagine history as being shaped only by kings, generals, and great battles. Uruk gently teaches us otherwise. Its legacy belongs just as much to ordinary people. To the farmer who patiently maintained the irrigation canals. To the potter who shaped vessels that stored the harvest. To the merchant who welcomed strangers from distant lands. To the builder who carefully placed one mud brick upon another. To the mother who taught her children kindness, honesty, and hard work. To the young apprentice who spent countless hours learning the difficult signs of cuneiform writing. Civilization was not created by one extraordinary person. It was created by thousands of ordinary people working together over countless generations. Perhaps that is why Uruk continues to inspire us today. It reminds us that history is not only made by famous names. History is also built through quiet acts of patience. One field planted. One wall repaired. One child educated. One story remembered. One clay tablet carefully written. As the afternoon sun slowly crosses the sky above the ruins, archaeologists continue uncovering these forgotten lives. Each broken pot tells of a family meal. Each worn tool speaks of careful craftsmanship. Each clay tablet reveals another ordinary day from 5,000 years ago. None of these discoveries are spectacular on their own. Yet together they allow us to hear the quiet heartbeat of the world's first city once again. Every discovery reminds us that the people of Uruk were not so different from ourselves. They worried about the harvest. They celebrated births. They mourned those they loved. They hoped their children would live peaceful and prosperous lives. Across 50 centuries, those hopes remain deeply familiar. As evening approaches, golden light once again settles across the ancient landscape. Long shadows stretch over the low mounds where magnificent buildings once stood. The wind carries no voices now. Only silence. Yet it is not an empty silence. It is filled with memory. The memory of the first scribes pressing reeds into soft clay. The memory of children running through dusty streets. The memory of merchants greeting travelers from distant lands. The memory of temple bells, quiet prayers, and peaceful evenings beneath brilliant Mesopotamian stars. Uruk no longer stands as a living city. But in another sense, it has never disappeared. Every notebook, every library, every city hall, every marketplace, every neighborhood, and every written story carries a faint echo of the remarkable ideas first nurtured here. Whenever people gather to build a community, preserve knowledge, or plan together for a better future, they unknowingly continue a tradition that began beside these ancient rivers thousands of years ago. The people of Uruk could never have imagined our modern world. They could not have dreamed of towering skyscrapers, airplanes crossing oceans, or satellites orbiting high above the Earth. Yet they helped begin the long human journey that made all of those achievements possible. And so, as the final light of day fades beyond the horizon, we quietly leave the ruins behind. The stars begin appearing overhead, the very same stars that watched over Uruk at the dawn of civilization. The wind moves gently across the silent earth. The ancient city rests peacefully beneath the night sky. Its walls have crumbled. Its streets have vanished. But its story continues. And perhaps it always will. Covering the lost city. The night slowly fades over the plains of southern Mesopotamia. For a few quiet moments, the world is wrapped in a deep blue stillness. The stars, which have watched over these lands since the earliest days of civilization, begin to disappear one by one as the eastern horizon glows with the soft colors of dawn. A cool breeze carries the scent of dry earth across the wide landscape, gently brushing over low mounds of dust and weathered mud brick. These silent hills do not seem remarkable. To a traveler passing by, they might appear to be ordinary rises in the earth, shaped only by nature and time. Small stones lie scattered among patches of dry grass. Fragments of ancient pottery peek through the sand, unnoticed by most who walk past. Birds search for insects among the broken bricks before lifting gracefully into the morning sky. It is difficult to imagine that beneath these peaceful mounds sleeps one of the greatest cities humanity has ever known. For thousands of years, Uruk remained hidden. Empires rose and disappeared. The ancient kings of Assyria became memories. Babylon flourished and eventually faded. The armies of Persia marched across Mesopotamia. Alexander the Great entered these lands. The Roman world expanded. The medieval era came and went. Great kingdoms appeared across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Ships crossed oceans. Steam engines transformed transportation. Electric lights illuminated cities. Airplanes carried people across continents. Humans eventually stepped onto the moon. Through all of these astonishing moments in history, Uruk lay quietly beneath the earth, wrapped in silence. The wind became its only visitor. Rain fell upon its buried walls. The sun warmed its forgotten streets. Year after year, century after century, millennium after millennium, the city waited patiently. Unlike people, the earth is never in a hurry. It keeps its memories carefully hidden. Every collapsed wall becomes another layer of soil. Every broken jar slowly disappears beneath drifting dust. Every abandoned courtyard is gently covered by nature's quiet hand. The city was not destroyed in a single moment. Instead, it slowly became part of the landscape itself. The people living nearby no longer remembered where the streets had once been. Children played upon ancient ruins without realizing they stood above temples older than recorded history. Shepherds guided their flocks across ground where scribes had once written the first words of civilization. The past slept peacefully beneath their feet. Then, many centuries later, curiosity awakened once again. During the 19th century, scholars across Europe became increasingly fascinated by the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. Travelers returned with stories of mysterious mounds scattered across modern Iraq. Local people often knew these places were ancient, but no one yet understood their true age or importance. Could these quiet hills hide forgotten cities? Could the stories written in the Bible and ancient Greek texts be connected to the buried landscapes of Mesopotamia? These questions inspired a new generation of explorers. Some came with notebooks. Others carried measuring tools. Many simply brought endless patience. Unlike treasure hunters searching for gold, these early archaeologists were searching for knowledge. They wished to understand how civilization had begun. Their work demanded extraordinary care. Excavation is not dramatic. There are no sudden discoveries every hour. Most days consist of slow, careful effort. A brush gently removes loose soil. A small trowel uncovers another row of ancient bricks. Measurements are recorded. Notes are written. Every object is carefully documented before being moved. Sometimes an entire day passes with only a few centimeters of progress. But archaeology has always rewarded patience. Little by little, Uruk began returning to the light. First came fragments of pottery. Then sections of ancient walls. Gradually, larger buildings emerged from beneath the earth. Temple foundations appeared. Storehouses. Courtyards. Workshops. The outlines of streets. Every discovery revealed another piece of the city's forgotten story. Among the most exciting discoveries were the clay tablets. Thousands of them. Some were complete. Others were broken into many pieces. Each tablet carried tiny wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay more than 5,000 years earlier. For a long time, no one could read them. The writing looked mysterious. Its meaning had been forgotten for nearly 2,000 years. But scholars refused to give up. Patiently, they compared symbols from different tablets. They searched for repeating patterns. They studied inscriptions copied by later civilizations. Slowly, almost unbelievably, the ancient language began to speak again. Imagine the excitement of reading words that no human had understood for centuries. A simple record of barley. A list of temple workers. An account of sheep. A royal inscription. Each translation opened another small window into the distant past. The people of Uruk were speaking once more. Not with voices, but through the quiet marks left by their reed styluses. As archaeologists continued their work, a remarkable realization slowly emerged. Uruk was older than anyone had expected. Far older. Its earliest layers reached back to the very beginnings of urban civilization. The discoveries transformed humanity's understanding of history. Before these excavations, many believed civilization had begun elsewhere or much later. Now the evidence lay clearly before them. Here, beneath these peaceful mounds, stood one of the first true cities ever built. Here, writing had first developed. Here, organized urban life had taken shape. Here, the story of civilization had entered a new chapter. The discovery was not only important for historians. It changed the way humanity understood itself. Every modern city, every written document, every government office, every marketplace, every school, and every library suddenly seemed connected to these quiet ruins in southern Mesopotamia. The distance between ancient and modern life became a little smaller. The people of Uruk were no longer distant strangers. They became our earliest urban ancestors. As the afternoon sun warms the excavation site, archaeologists continue working with the same calm patience shown by the ancient scribes thousands of years before. One carefully records measurements. Another gently cleans a newly discovered tablet. Others photograph walls before excavation continues. Their tools are different, but their purpose feels strangely familiar. Both scribes and archaeologists preserve memory. One created history. The other uncovers it. As evening approaches, long shadows stretch across the ancient city once more. The wind moves gently over temple foundations that have not felt open air for thousands of years. Birds settle quietly upon broken walls. The silence returns. But it is no longer the silence of forgetting. It is the silence of remembrance. For after sleeping beneath the earth for countless generations, Uruk has found its voice again. Treasures hidden beneath the sand. The morning sun rises slowly over the ancient ruins of Uruk. Its warm golden light spreads across the broad plain of southern Mesopotamia, revealing a landscape that appears peaceful and almost untouched. A gentle breeze carries fine grains of sand across low earthen mounds, while a few birds circle quietly overhead before settling upon scattered fragments of ancient brick. To most visitors, these mounds seem ordinary. There are no towering walls standing proudly against the sky. No magnificent palaces covered in gold. No great statues welcoming travelers from distant lands. Instead, there is silence. A silence so deep that it almost feels sacred. Yet beneath this quiet earth lies one of humanity's greatest archives. Every handful of soil holds another forgotten memory. Every broken brick belongs to a building that once sheltered families, craftsmen, priests, merchants, or scribes. Every layer beneath the ground represents another generation of people who lived ordinary lives while unknowingly shaping the future of civilization. Archaeologists understand something that few people notice. The earth is patient. It remembers everything. For thousands of years, Uruk slowly disappeared beneath windblown dust, seasonal floods, and collapsing mud brick walls. One building crumbled upon another. Roofs gave way. Courtyards filled with sand. Streets vanished beneath layer after layer of earth until the city itself became hidden from view. But nothing was truly lost. The desert had quietly become a library. As the first archaeologists began their careful excavations, they quickly realized that every few centimeters of soil revealed another chapter of history. The work required extraordinary patience. Unlike adventure stories filled with sudden discoveries and hidden treasure, real archaeology moves slowly. A brush gently removes loose dust. A small trowel uncovers the edge of an ancient wall. Measurements are carefully recorded. Photographs are taken. Every object remains exactly where it is found until its position has been carefully documented. Some days pass without any remarkable discovery at all. Then, suddenly, a small piece of pottery appears. To an ordinary visitor, it might seem insignificant. To an archaeologist, it is a voice from 5,000 years ago. Imagine watching as a worker gently lifts a broken clay bowl from the earth. Its rim is chipped. Its surface is worn smooth by time. Yet someone once held this bowl every single day. Perhaps it carried fresh water from the canal. Perhaps it held barley porridge during a family meal. Perhaps a child learned to eat from it while sitting beside loving parents. The bowl tells no dramatic story. Its importance lies in its simplicity. It reminds us that history belongs not only to kings, but also to ordinary families. Nearby, another excavation reveals a collection of clay seals. These small carved objects may fit comfortably into the palm of your hand, yet they transformed life in ancient Mesopotamia. Merchants rolled them across soft clay to leave detailed impressions, much like a modern signature or official stamp. Every seal was unique. Some showed animals walking peacefully across the landscape. Others displayed scenes of worship, farming, or daily work. A few carried symbols identifying their owner. When a merchant sealed a container of grain or a shipment of valuable goods, everyone recognized whose seal had been impressed into the clay. Trust was built through these simple objects. Long before written contracts became common, these seals helped protect honesty in trade. As excavations continued, archaeologists uncovered something even more remarkable. Thousands upon thousands of clay tablets. Some remained almost perfectly preserved. Others had broken into dozens of pieces over countless centuries. Each tablet carried tiny wedge-shaped marks pressed into its surface while the clay was still soft. These marks represented one of humanity's greatest inventions: writing. Many visitors imagined that ancient writing recorded only kings, battles, and heroic adventures. The reality is wonderfully different. Most of the earliest tablets from Uruk describe ordinary life. Lists of grain stored after harvest. Records of sheep and goats. Inventories of pottery. Payments made to workers. Temple offerings. Deliveries of fish. The daily rhythm of an entire city quietly preserved upon clay. Reading these tablets is almost like opening someone's forgotten notebook. One tablet records how much barley entered a storehouse. Another notes how many workers received food during the repair of an irrigation canal. A third carefully lists animals cared for by temple officials. Each record seems small. Together they reveal the heartbeat of an entire civilization. As the morning grows warmer, archaeologists move toward the remains of one of Uruk's great temples. Only the foundation survive today, but they still reveal astonishing skill. Millions of mud bricks had once been shaped by hand. Workers mixed river clay with straw before placing the bricks beneath the hot Mesopotamian sun to dry. One brick. then another, then another. Patiently, thousands upon thousands were laid together until magnificent buildings rose above the city. Standing beside these ancient foundations, it becomes impossible not to admire the determination of those early builders. They possessed no cranes, no steel machinery, no modern engineering equipment. Only simple tools, careful planning, and remarkable cooperation. The temples they created stood for centuries, not because they were rushed, but because they were built with patience. Farther across the excavation site, archaeologists uncover the remains of ordinary homes. These discoveries are often the most touching. Inside one small house lies a clay oven where bread was baked each morning. Nearby stand large storage jars once filled with barley, dates, lentils, and oil. Grinding stones remain exactly where they were left thousands of years ago. In one corner rests a child's small clay toy shaped like an animal. Its edges are smooth from tiny hands that played with it long ago. Suddenly, the ancient city no longer feels distant. It feels familiar. Parents prepared meals. Children invented games. Neighbors shared conversations across quiet courtyards. Grandparents told stories beneath starlit skies. The people of Uruk laughed, celebrated, worried, hoped, and dreamed much as we do today. Across 5,000 years, the similarities are far greater than the differences. One of archaeology's greatest gifts is this quiet realization. History is not only about famous rulers. It is about ordinary lives. Every broken pot belonged to someone. Every doorway welcomed a family home. Every workshop echoed with careful hands learning a craft. Civilization was built by countless individuals whose names have long been forgotten, yet whose work still surrounds us. As afternoon sunlight slowly turns golden, archaeologists continue making careful notes. Every wall is measured. Every artifact is catalogued. Every discovery adds another sentence to the story of Uruk. No single object explains everything. Instead, thousands of small discoveries gradually come together like pieces of a vast puzzle. A seal explains trade. A tablet explains writing. A house explains family life. A temple explains belief. A canal explains agriculture. Together they reveal something extraordinary. They reveal the first city. Perhaps the greatest treasure ever uncovered at Uruk is not made of gold. It is not a jeweled crown or a magnificent statue. It is knowledge. The knowledge that humanity's earliest cities were places of cooperation, learning, creativity, and quiet determination. They remind us that civilization did not appear suddenly. It grew slowly, one generation at a time. One field planted. One canal dug. One brick laid. One child taught. One story remembered. One clay tablet carefully written. As evening approaches, the archaeologists gently cover their discoveries to protect them. How Uruk still lives in our world today. The first light of dawn quietly spreads across the modern world. In one city, commuters begin walking toward train stations. In another, shopkeepers unlock their doors before the morning customers arrive. Across the globe, office buildings slowly fill with people beginning another ordinary day. Children gather their books before leaving for school. Farmers step into fields. Bakers prepare fresh bread before sunrise. Delivery trucks roll through streets that have not yet become busy. It all feels completely normal. So familiar that we rarely stop to wonder where these everyday routines first began. Now, let us gently travel back more than 5,000 years. The noise of engines fades away. Glass buildings disappear. Roads become dusty paths. Steel and concrete give way to sun-dried mud bricks. Before us stands Uruk once again, resting peacefully beside the Euphrates River as the first rays of the morning sun illuminate its temples and canals. Although thousands of years separate our world from theirs, something remarkable begins to appear. The differences are obvious. The similarities are even greater. The people of Uruk also woke before sunrise. They opened workshops, prepared meals, walked to their places of work, visited markets, recorded business transactions, maintained public buildings, educated young apprentices, resolved disagreements, planned for future harvests, lived together as members of one organized community. In many ways, they were doing the same things we continue to do every single day. This is perhaps Uruk's greatest legacy. It did not simply become the world's first great city. It created patterns of urban life that continue across the modern world. Imagine standing in the center of any modern city. Whether it is Tokyo, Cairo, London, Delhi, Sao Paulo, or New York, every city depends upon the same basic principles. People cooperate. Food arrives from surrounding farmland. Goods are traded through marketplaces or shops. Records are kept. Leaders organize public services. Buildings are repaired. Knowledge is shared. Children are educated. Communities solve problems together. These ideas seem ordinary because they have surrounded us all our lives. Yet every one of them has deep roots reaching back toward the earliest cities of Mesopotamia. Uruk did not invent every aspect of civilization, but it demonstrated something that had never before existed on such a scale. Thousands of unrelated people could live together peacefully within one organized community. That simple realization transformed human history. Before cities, most people lived in small villages. Everyone knew nearly everyone else. Life was simple, but opportunities were limited. Uruk changed that forever. Large populations made specialization possible. Not everyone needed to grow food. Some became potters. Others became builders. Some devoted themselves entirely to weaving cloth. Others studied mathematics, religion, engineering, or writing. When people specialized in different skills, knowledge advanced more quickly. Every generation built upon the discoveries of those before it. Innovation became part of everyday life. Today we call this division of labor. For the people of Uruk, it simply became the natural rhythm of their growing city. Writing remains another extraordinary gift. Each morning across the modern world, billions of people read something. A newspaper, a message, a school book, a street sign, an email, a shopping receipt, a novel, a map. Words surround our lives so completely that we seldom think about their origins. Yet the earliest written records developed in Uruk for surprisingly humble reasons. Farmers needed to count grain. Merchants needed to record trade. Temple officials needed accurate accounts. Small practical problems inspired one of humanity's greatest inventions. From those first wedge-shaped marks impressed into soft clay grew every library, university, scientific journal, and history book that exists today. Every sentence we write carries a distant echo of those ancient scribes patiently pressing reeds into damp clay. As the morning sun rises higher, let us leave the temple district and walk once more through Uruk's bustling marketplace. Merchants greet one another warmly. Boats arrive carrying timber, copper, shells, and precious stones. Potters display rows of carefully crafted jars. Weavers fold beautiful woolen cloth. Farmers exchange baskets filled with barley and dates. There is trust, order, cooperation. Now imagine a modern marketplace. The goods have changed. The buildings are different. Money has replaced barter in many places. Digital payments move across invisible networks. Yet the purpose remains remarkably familiar. People continue gathering to exchange goods, ideas, and services. Trade still connects distant communities. Uruk helped establish that tradition. The same can be said for government. The leaders of Uruk organized irrigation systems, supervised public buildings, maintained storehouses, and coordinated large construction projects. Modern governments perform far more complex responsibilities, yet their central purpose remains similar. Communities work together to accomplish tasks that individuals cannot complete alone. This idea first grew strong within the great cities of ancient Mesopotamia. As afternoon approaches, another quiet connection becomes visible. Education. The scribes of Uruk trained apprentices through years of careful practice. Students copied symbols repeatedly until writing became second nature. Teachers patiently corrected mistakes. Knowledge passed from one generation to another. Today, classrooms look very different. Children use notebooks instead of clay tablets. Teachers explain subjects far beyond anything imagined in the ancient world. Computers provide access to information beyond measure. Yet the heart of education remains unchanged. Every civilization depends upon one generation teaching the next. Uruk understood this long ago. The city also teaches us something deeper than technology or organization. It reminds us that great civilizations are built slowly, brick by brick, season by season, generation after generation. No single person created Uruk. Thousands contributed. Builders, farmers, scribes, priests, merchants, potters, children who grew into skilled adults, grandparents who passed along wisdom. Every ordinary life added another thread to the fabric of civilization. This lesson feels especially meaningful today. We often celebrate great inventions and famous leaders. Yet history quietly reminds us that lasting achievements almost always emerge through cooperation. Communities build civilizations, not individuals alone. As evening slowly approaches, let us step back from both the ancient city and the modern world. The centuries between them seem enormous. 5,000 years have passed. Empires have risen and fallen. Languages have changed. Technology has transformed nearly every aspect of human life. Yet beneath these changes, the same quiet human hopes remain. Parents still wish for peaceful futures for their children. Neighbors still help one another. Communities still gather to solve shared problems. People continue recording knowledge, exchanging ideas, building homes, and creating places where others may flourish. Uruk may no longer stand as a living city. Its temples have fallen silent. Its canals no longer carry water through crowded neighborhoods. Its marketplaces no longer welcome travelers arriving by boat. But the ideas born there never disappeared. They became part of us. As the sun sets gently over both the ancient ruins and the countless cities of our modern world, one quiet truth becomes impossible to ignore. Uruk is not only a place in history. In many ways, it is still alive. It lives in every city where strangers become neighbors. In every classroom where knowledge is shared. In every written word that preserves memory. And in every community that believes people can achieve more together than they ever could alone. The eternal city of memory. The day is drawing to a close. High above the plains of ancient Mesopotamia, the sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon. Its golden light stretches across the quiet landscape, bathing the ancient ruins of Uruk in warm shades of amber and bronze. A gentle breeze moves softly through the dry grasses that now cover the old city, carrying with it the quiet whispers of a place that changed the course of human history. The birds that spent the afternoon soaring above the open plain gradually return to their nests. Long shadows fall across the weathered remains of mud brick walls. The earth, which has faithfully guarded the memories of Uruk for more than 5,000 years, grows peaceful beneath the evening sky. Our long journey is almost at its end. Together, we have walked through the first fields planted beside the Euphrates River. We have watched a small farming settlement slowly become the world's first great city. We have wandered through its narrow streets, visited its bustling marketplaces, climbed its temple platforms, and quietly observed the patient work of the first scribes as they pressed tiny wedge-shaped signs into soft clay. We have listened to stories of Gilgamesh beneath starlit skies. We have witnessed centuries of change as new cities rose across Mesopotamia. We have stood beside archaeologists gently uncovering forgotten walls buried beneath layers of earth. And finally, we have discovered how the ideas born in Uruk continue to live within the modern world. Now, as evening settles once more across the ancient plain, it is time to pause and reflect upon everything this remarkable city has given us. Perhaps the greatest surprise about Uruk is that its most valuable treasures were never made of gold. When many people imagine ancient civilizations, they picture magnificent jewels, enormous statues, or vast collections of precious metals. Yet Uruk teaches a quieter lesson. Its greatest achievements cannot be locked inside museums. They cannot be weighed upon scales. They are ideas. Ideas that change the future of humanity forever. The idea that thousands of people could live together within one organized community. The idea that knowledge could be preserved through writing rather than memory alone. The idea that trade could peacefully connect distant cultures. The idea that every generation could leave something valuable for those who would come after. These gifts are invisible. Yet they have shaped every civilization that followed. Imagine for a moment that Uruk had never existed. History would almost certainly have found another path. Human beings are endlessly creative. Another city may eventually have developed writing. Another society may have organized large urban communities. But history unfolded here. Beside the waters of the Euphrates. Upon fertile soil nourished by patient rivers. Among ordinary people who simply wished to build better lives for their families. They did not know they were changing the world. They were simply solving everyday problems. How should water reach the fields? How should grain be stored? How should merchants record their trade? How should knowledge be passed to children? One careful solution led naturally to another. And over countless generations, those small solutions became civilization itself. There is something deeply comforting about this thought. History is often remembered through the names of kings and conquerors. Yet Uruk reminds us that civilization grows most strongly through quiet cooperation. A farmer digging an irrigation canal. A builder shaping another mud brick. A potter turning a wheel with steady hands. A teacher guiding a young apprentice. A mother telling stories beneath the evening stars. A scribe patiently recording another ordinary day.